The shadows of history are filled with unanswered questions, stories that defy logic, secrets buried deep within time, waiting to be uncovered. What if the greatest mysteries of our past aren't confined to the pages of books, but still echo in the silence of our present? From lost civilizations to unexplained disappearances, there are enigmas that haunt our collective memory, demanding answers. Who built the Great Pyramids? What happened to the lost city of Atlantis? And why do certain ancient symbols still baffle even the brightest minds? So, sit back, relax, and let's embark on a journey through 3 hours of the biggest mysteries in history. In the desolate expanse of the Tarim Basin, nestled within the arid heart of Central Asia, lies a mystery that has intrigued historians, archaeologists, and curious minds for centuries. It is here, amidst the barren sands and the harsh winds, that a chilling discovery was made: the screaming mummies. The Tarim Basin, a vast desert landscape stretching across what is now western China, is home to one of the world's most enigmatic archaeological sites. Surrounded by the towering peaks of the Tian Shan Mountains to the north and the vast Taklamakan Desert to the south, this remote region is as isolated as it is historic. Hidden in its soil are the mummified remains of people who lived thousands of years ago, in a time before written history. Their bodies, remarkably preserved, are not only a testament to the advanced embalming techniques of an ancient civilization, but also to something far more mysterious. The mummies themselves are a striking sight. Their skeletal faces are frozen in an eerie scream, eyes wide in eternal terror, mouths agape as though in a final cry for help. The mummification process, far beyond the simple preservation of the body, reveals intricate details about their lives. Their clothing, woven with intricate patterns, suggests a high level of craftsmanship, and the grave sites they were found in reveal the existence of a sophisticated culture, one that spanned across centuries. But it is the manner in which they were mummified and the unsettling expressions on their faces that give these mummies their unnerving reputation. The most famous of them, discovered in the early 20th century, have baffled scholars and led to a host of theories about who these people were, where they came from, and what fate befell them. One of the most widely accepted theories is that these individuals were part of an ancient group, the Tocharians, who spoke an Indo-European language. They are believed to have migrated across the vast Eurasian steppe, eventually settling in the Tarim Basin. Their distinctive appearance, fair skin, tall stature, and sometimes even reddish hair, has led some scholars to speculate about their origins, raising questions about possible connections to the distant peoples of Europe or even the Middle East. Yet, there are elements of their presence in the Tarim Basin that remain unexplained. How did these people, seemingly so different in appearance and culture, come to inhabit a region so distant from their possible ancestral homelands? And what was the cause of the horrific expressions on their faces? Could it be the result of some ritualistic practice, or perhaps a form of execution or trauma? The circumstances surrounding their deaths remain elusive, and a wide range of theories has emerged. Some believe the screams are a result of post-mortem rigor, a natural reaction to the drying process that would stretch the facial muscles into a permanent grimace. Others, however, suggest that these people met violent or sudden deaths, maybe during warfare or in a ritualistic sacrifice, leaving them with faces locked in eternal terror. More speculative theories suggest even deeper mysteries. Some have posited that these mummies were not just victims of time or warfare, but could be connected to an ancient, forgotten civilization with knowledge or practices far beyond what we understand today. Could these people have been part of a lost empire, whose secrets were lost to the sands of time? Or perhaps they were the last of a group with knowledge of the unknown, a knowledge that, in their final moments, they were unable to protect. There are other theories, too, ones that stray further into the realm of the extraordinary. Could there be a connection between these mummies and ancient extraterrestrial visitors, their appearance and mannerisms hinting at some larger cosmic truth? Or is it a symbol of a much more earthly terror, born of the ancient world's most primal fears? The mystery remains unsolved, and perhaps it always will. The mummies of the Tarim Basin continue to stir the imagination of all who encounter them, but the questions they pose are far from being answered. Why do their faces scream at us from the past? What can they reveal about a lost civilization? And what might they still be hiding, deep within the sands of time? The answers for now remain buried. As we step away from the dry, sun-scorched desert of the Tarim Basin, where the mummies still scream their silent stories, we turn our gaze westward to another unsettling mystery, one that has long haunted the borders of the Roman Empire. This time, the intrigue lies not in the remnants of a forgotten civilization, but in the sudden disappearance of an entire legion, lost to time and history, the vanishing of the 9th Legion in Britain. Imagine for a moment the wild expanse of ancient Britain. The land is a rugged patchwork of dense forests, rolling hills, and muddy rivers, a far cry from the structured empire that ruled much of Europe at the time. It is in this challenging, untamed environment that the 9th Hispana Legion, a unit of Roman soldiers, was stationed in the 2nd century AD. The Romans, with their vast empire stretching across Europe and beyond, had no fear of conquest, yet something about this remote, misty corner of the world would prove too great a challenge. The 9th Legion had a distinguished history, having served in various military campaigns across the empire, from the battlefields of Spain to the tumultuous regions of Palestine. Yet their final mission took them to the farthest reaches of the Roman frontier, what we know today as northern Britain, where they were tasked with maintaining control over the unruly tribes of the region, especially the fierce Pictish tribes to the north. This was no simple outpost. It was a volatile environment where survival was often uncertain. Around the year 117 AD, the 9th Legion was stationed in Eboracum, present-day York, from where they were sent north to deal with a growing rebellion from the Picts, the Celtic people who lived in the lands beyond Hadrian's Wall. After that, the records go silent. The Legion simply disappears from the pages of history, without a trace. No victory report, no final battle, no message to Rome. It's as if they never existed. At first, the disappearance of the 9th Legion might seem like a simple logistical oversight, a moment of forgetfulness by ancient historians or an oversight lost in the tides of time. But the deeper you dig into the mystery, the stranger it becomes. Was it simply a casualty of war? Did the Legion fall in battle? Its soldiers slaughtered in some bloody confrontation with the Picts or another tribal force? Or did something more mysterious and perhaps far darker transpire? There are some scholars who suggest that the 9th Legion met its end on a battlefield. Perhaps, they speculate, the Picts, in a rare, overwhelming act of unity, launched a devastating assault, crushing the Romans and wiping out their presence in the north. But this theory presents its own set of problems. If such a defeat had occurred, why was it not recorded in Roman history? The Romans, after all, were meticulous in their record-keeping, and they were notorious for documenting every major battle, defeat, and victory. Yet, there is no mention of such a catastrophic loss in the annals of Roman historians. Others point to a different theory, that the 9th Legion simply disbanded. In this version, the Legion was gradually absorbed into other military units, their identity dissolved over time. However, this doesn't explain the complete disappearance of all records about the Legion's fate, and it certainly doesn't explain the eerie silence surrounding the men who disappeared. Perhaps then, the truth is more complex, lying somewhere between these possibilities. One theory that has gained some traction in recent years suggests that the 9th Legion was not destroyed by enemy forces at all, but may have defected. This would have been an extraordinary act, an entire Roman legion choosing to abandon their loyalty to Rome and align themselves with local tribes or even settle in the wilds of Britain. There is a strange allure to this idea, though it raises even more questions. Why would they turn against the empire they had served for so long? Was there some sort of internal dissent or political upheaval within the legion that led to this unexpected betrayal? Or perhaps a shared desire to live among the Pictish tribes, with their different ways of life and their own unique sense of freedom? Still, the question of whether the Ninth Legion perished in battle or scattered in defection doesn't quite capture the full scope of the mystery. For it's not just the fate of the legion that's unresolved. It's also the absence of any physical evidence of their final days. No burial sites, no mass graves, no remnants of Roman weaponry or armor. There is simply nothing. The absence is haunting. One of the more fringe theories surrounding the Ninth Legion involves a more supernatural explanation. Could the Legion have been the victims of some inexplicable event? The idea that the soldiers were lost in some kind of rift in time or spatial anomaly might sound far-fetched, but it's an idea that has gained attention in more speculative circles. Some theorists point to the eerie, isolated nature of the land in which they disappeared. Forests that were believed to be inhabited by spirits and forces unknown to the Romans. A land where the boundary between the physical and supernatural world might have seemed thinner than anywhere else. And then, there's the possibility that the truth is even stranger. Could the Ninth Legion have been relocated in secret, their disappearance orchestrated for reasons unknown? Were they moved to a distant location, their fate sealed in a way that history itself chose to forget? The Romans, after all, had a certain aptitude for secretive operations, and the empire was no stranger to covert missions. It's a theory that, while intriguing, remains speculative at best. One of the most poignant aspects of the Ninth Legion's disappearance is the unanswered question: why were they never heard from again? Was their silence a result of defeat, desertion, or a force beyond understanding? And what does their disappearance tell us about the vulnerabilities of even the greatest empires? Empires that, in the end, are not immune to the twists of fate. As we continue to explore the unsolved mysteries of history, we're left with only questions, and the Ninth Legion remains one of the most haunting. What really happened to the men of the Ninth? And in the end, what mysteries still lie buried beneath the soil of ancient Britain? As we step further into the tapestry of history, leaving behind the misty lands of Britain and the lost Ninth Legion, we find ourselves in the heart of Merovingian France, an era defined by its dynastic struggles, ancient superstitions, and the dark shadows cast by the powerful kings of the time. It is here, in the early 7th century, that a tale unfolds, one of betrayal, tragedy, and an ominous curse that would haunt not only the royal family, but the very tombs of the dead. This is the story of the cursed tomb of King Chilperic I. Chilperic I, the king of the Franks, is a figure often overshadowed by the more well-known leaders of his time. A monarch in the midst of the fractious Merovingian dynasty, his reign was marked by political intrigue, familial betrayals, and the brutal realities of courtly life. Known for his ruthless tactics and personal scandals, most notably his multiple marriages and the shocking murder of his wife, Galswintha, Chilperic's death in 584 AD would set the stage for a mystery that would echo through the centuries. Chilperic's death is itself shrouded in mystery. Some say he was murdered, possibly by his own son or a political rival. Others suggest he died from a sudden illness, a fate not uncommon in the unstable world of the 6th century. Yet, whatever the true cause, one thing is certain: his burial and the events that followed would be far from ordinary. The tomb of King Chilperic I, discovered in 1830, was located in the Basilica of Saint-Denis, just outside Paris, a site renowned for being the burial place of many of the French kings. When archaeologists uncovered his tomb, what they found was both astonishing and chilling. The grave, adorned with priceless treasures, gold, jewels, and intricately crafted artifacts, seemed to suggest that this king was treated with the utmost reverence, despite his controversial reign. But the real mystery would soon emerge from the shadows of the tomb itself. Among the artifacts, there was a discovery that would forever change the perception of Chilperic's resting place. A strange inscription, carved into the stone of the tomb, read, "May he be cursed for his sins against the kingdom." At first glance, it seemed like a simple act of posthumous vengeance. Yet, upon closer inspection, the curse seemed to be far more than a mere inscription. It felt like a warning, a sign that something far darker was at play. The tomb's location was another point of intrigue. The Basilica of Saint-Denis, long considered a sacred place, had witnessed the burials of many kings, yet it seemed as though Chilperic's grave was somehow different. His tomb was positioned in a way that some historians argue was not in keeping with the traditions of royal burials. The unorthodox nature of the burial site, combined with the eerie curse, led many to believe that his death and burial were intertwined with forces beyond the ordinary. Could this have been the act of those who wished to erase him from history, ensuring that his legacy would be one of revulsion and fear? Or was this curse something deeper, linked to the mystical beliefs that flourished at the time? During the Merovingian period, it was not uncommon for the royal family to dabble in the occult, using dark rites and invoking ancient deities in an attempt to solidify their power. Chilperic's own actions were sometimes seen as an affront to the gods, and his reputed sins, both political and personal, may have left him vulnerable to a curse placed upon him by those who opposed him. But the mystery doesn't end there. The discovery of the tomb and its ominous inscription sparked something far more unsettling. An extraordinary series of deaths and misfortunes that followed the opening of Chilperic's grave. Several members of the excavation team, as well as those who had handled the artifacts, reportedly met untimely and tragic ends. Some died in accidents, others from sudden, unexplained illnesses. One even fell into a deep, mysterious coma from which he would never awaken. These deaths were enough to fuel rumors that the curse was real, that the words inscribed upon the tomb had not been a mere symbol of anger, but a legitimate warning from beyond the grave. The unsettling series of events surrounding the tomb led to widespread speculation that Chilperic's final resting place had indeed been cursed, and that anyone who disturbed it would suffer the consequences. But was it truly the curse that caused these tragedies? Or could there have been a more rational explanation? Some historians point to the sheer danger and unsanitary conditions of 19th-century archaeological digs, conditions that could lead to disease, accidents, or other misfortunes. Others suggest that the sense of foreboding surrounding the tomb may have been enough to inspire psychological reactions among those involved in the excavation, leading them to interpret their misfortunes as a fulfillment of the curse. There are, however, other theories that venture into more speculative territory. Some have wondered whether Chilperic's curse was not an earthly one, but a supernatural force tied to the very foundation of the tomb. Was the site itself tainted by something ancient, perhaps a dark magic or an artifact imbued with malevolent power? Could the curse have been a warning from a forgotten time, a remnant of the older pagan beliefs that still clung to the land long after the advent of Christianity? Another theory delves into the idea that Chilperic's actions before his death had left him open to darker forces. His brutal methods of ruling, his involvement in family feuds, and the rumors surrounding his death all suggest a man whose soul may have been in turmoil at the time of his passing. In this interpretation, the curse could be seen as a kind of divine retribution, an attempt by unseen forces to balance the scales of justice for his transgressions. As the centuries have passed, the tomb of King Chilperic I has remained a subject of fascination and fear. The curse that surrounded his final resting place has not faded with time, but instead, it continues to inspire questions that remain unanswered. What was the true nature of the curse? Did it have the power to reach beyond the grave, causing death and suffering? Or was it perhaps a tragic reflection of the ruthless nature of the man buried within? And as we reflect on the unanswered questions surrounding Chilperic's tomb, we are reminded that some mysteries, no matter how deeply we dig into the past, are not easily solved. Perhaps the tomb still holds secrets waiting to be discovered, or perhaps, as with many great mysteries, the truth may forever remain buried beneath layers of stone, time, and myth. As we leave behind the ominous curse of King Chilperic and the long shadows cast by his tomb, we now turn our gaze to the mist-laden coasts of Ireland, a land rich with history, myth, and legend. Here, amid the rugged cliffs and endless waters, lies a mystery that has intrigued sailors, cartographers, and historians for centuries. The disappearance of Hy-Brasil, the legendary Phantom Island. The tale of Hy-Brasil begins in the fog of ancient myth. For centuries, this mysterious island was said to lie just off the coast of Ireland, appearing only once every 7 years, veiled in mist and surrounded by strange, almost supernatural qualities. Descriptions of the island varied. Some said it was a paradise, a land of great beauty and abundant resources, inhabited by wise and mystical people. Others spoke of it as a place of magic, a land where time itself behaved oddly, and where ancient knowledge and treasures were hidden. For years, maps of the period from the 15th to the 17th centuries bore the name of Hy-Brasil, and it appeared on nautical charts, often depicted as a small, round island off the west coast of Ireland. Its name, derived from an old Irish word Brazil, suggested a legendary land of abundance. Yet, despite its prominent presence on maps, no one was able to conclusively find it. The mystery of Hy-Brasil became so compelling that it drew the attention of explorers, merchants, and cartographers, all of whom sought this elusive island. What was Hy-Brasil, and why did it remain so tantalizingly out of reach? Was it merely the product of myth, an island that never existed? Or was there something more to this ancient story, a deeper truth hidden beneath layers of folklore and fading maps? The first recorded sightings of Hy-Brasil date back to the 14th century. Irish monks and sailors spoke of it, describing a mist-shrouded island in the Atlantic, often located in the same area where the western coast of Ireland meets the open sea. They described a land not unlike the fabled Isles of the Blessed, a mythical paradise in Irish folklore, where time stood still and ancient wisdom could be found. The island was said to appear and disappear like a mirage, visible only for a brief period every 7 years. But it wasn't until the late 15th century that Hy-Brasil made its way onto official maps. The famed Portuguese cartographer, Pedro Reinel, included the island on his maps of the Atlantic, placing it in the same general location where modern-day Ireland and the United Kingdom meet the ocean. Over the next several decades, other explorers and mapmakers followed suit, each adding their own versions of Hy-Brasil to their charts, further cementing its place in the geographical imagination of the time. One of the most curious aspects of the island's representation on maps was its recurring appearance, often shown as a small, circular island, sometimes isolated and sometimes with a network of small islands surrounding it. It was always positioned just beyond the reach of known lands, making it a tantalizing and elusive target for seafarers. Yet, despite numerous efforts to discover it, no one ever seemed to find it. The first real attempt to find Hy-Brasil came in the 16th century, when a group of explorers set sail to search for the island. In 1542, John Nisbet, a Scottish explorer, claimed to have seen the island off the coast of Ireland. He reported seeing a landmass covered in mist, but despite his efforts to approach, the island vanished before his eyes, much as it had in previous stories. The crew, bewildered and unnerved, returned to port without any definitive evidence of the island's existence. In the centuries that followed, Hy-Brasil continued to appear on maps and charts, though its location and even its very existence began to be questioned. By the 18th century, scientific advancements in navigation and cartography had made the idea of a phantom island increasingly implausible. As explorers pushed farther into the Atlantic, and as more accurate maps were drawn, the island seemed to fade from view, its once legendary status relegated to the realm of myth. However, some modern researchers believe that Hy-Brasil might not have been entirely a product of fantasy. A theory that has gained traction suggests that the island could have been a real but long-lost landmass, possibly a small island or a submerged part of the continental shelf that was temporarily above sea level in ancient times. There are those who propose that Hy-Brasil could have been a remnant of a much older land, one that has since sunk beneath the waves due to rising sea levels or tectonic shifts. In fact, there are some who point to the existence of a phenomenon known as sea mirages, or superior mirages, as an explanation for the reports of the island's appearance. These optical illusions, caused by the refraction of light through layers of air at different temperatures, can cause distant objects, such as ships, land masses, or even entire islands, to appear to float on the horizon, often distorted and shifting. Could this explain why Hy-Brasil appeared and disappeared, only to vanish from sight as soon as it was approached? Others have speculated that Hy-Brasil was not an island at all, but rather a misidentification of a more familiar location, perhaps a distant part of the Irish coast, or one of the more isolated islands in the Atlantic. Some have even wondered if Hy-Brasil could have been a place where early navigators confused or distorted their observations, leading them to believe they had discovered something that didn't actually exist. Despite these logical explanations, there are still those who remain captivated by the legend of Hy-Brasil, holding fast to the belief that the island may have once existed, and that it could still be waiting to be discovered. Some even suggest that there may be ancient, hidden knowledge tied to the island's mysterious nature, a treasure trove of artifacts or a lost civilization left behind by a people who were advanced in ways that modern societies have yet to understand. As we look back on the centuries of exploration and the many attempts to uncover the secrets of Hy-Brasil, one thing remains clear. The island remains a mystery, an enigma woven into the fabric of history. Its existence, whether real or imagined, has left a mark on the collective consciousness of those who have searched for it, and perhaps it will forever be shrouded in the mists of time. What, then, is the truth behind Hy-Brasil? Was it simply a mirage, a myth born of the imaginations of sailors and cartographers? Or was there once an island, an ancient, vanished land, that could still hold the secrets of a forgotten age? As the waters of the Atlantic continue to lap against the shores of Ireland, the mystery of Hy-Brasil remains unsolved, a question left unanswered for all who dare to seek it. And perhaps, just as the island itself was said to do, the truth remains hidden beneath the fog, waiting to be found. As we drift further into the mysteries of time, leaving behind the vanishing island of Hy-Brasil and the long-lost kingdom of Chilperic, we now journey across the vast deserts and rugged mesas of the American Southwest, where another great enigma lies buried beneath the earth and the sands. This is the story of the disappearance of the ancestral Puebloans, a people whose advanced civilizations flourished in the region for centuries, only to vanish without a trace. The ancestral Puebloans, also known as the Anasazi, were a culture that inhabited the southwestern United States long before European settlers arrived. Their homeland spanned parts of what is now Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah. It is a harsh landscape, one of red rock canyons, steep cliffs, and vast stretches of desert, where the blazing sun beats down mercilessly and the cold desert nights chill to the bone. Yet, against this seemingly inhospitable backdrop, the ancestral Puebloans built sophisticated dwellings, remarkable cities, and intricate networks of trade. The most iconic of their creations are the cliff dwellings, massive multi-story structures carved into the canyon walls, many of which still stand to this day. In places like Mesa Verde, Chaco Canyon, and Canyon de Chelly, these ancient cities tell the story of a people who thrived in this landscape for over 1,000 years. But by the end of the 12th century, these cities were suddenly and mysteriously abandoned. The ancestral Puebloans, who had once flourished in these cliffside fortresses and sprawling pueblos, vanished. Their great cities, once bustling with life, stood empty, their walls crumbling, and their homes abandoned to the wind and the dust. The reasons for this abrupt disappearance remain one of the most enduring mysteries of North American history. What happened to the ancestral Puebloans? Why did a culture that had developed such remarkable feats of architecture, agriculture, and astronomy leave their homes, seemingly without warning? There are no written records to shed light on this puzzle. No journals, no histories, no stone tablets left behind to explain their sudden departure. For decades, archaeologists and anthropologists have attempted to answer this question, and while a number of theories have emerged, none have been conclusive. One of the most widely accepted explanations centers on the climate. The ancestral Puebloans were heavily reliant on agriculture, growing crops such as corn, beans, and squash in the desert landscape. However, around the late 12th century, the region experienced a prolonged drought, one that severely impacted their ability to grow food. The already arid climate became even more inhospitable, and the once fertile areas of the southwest turned dry and barren. Could the collapse of their agricultural system have driven the ancestral Puebloans to abandon their cities? This is a plausible theory, especially considering that the pueblos were often built in remote areas, dependent on irrigation systems to water their crops. As water sources dwindled and food became scarce, it is reasonable to assume that the people would have been forced to leave in search of better conditions. Yet, if this were the sole reason, why did they abandon their cliff dwellings in particular? These structures, built into the natural rock faces of the canyons, would have been remarkably resilient to drought and weather. There is another theory that points to social unrest. The ancestral Puebloans, like many ancient civilizations, may have faced internal strife, tribal conflicts, resource scarcity, or power struggles that destabilized their society. Evidence of violent confrontations and the remains of burnt structures suggest that conflict played a role in the abandonment of some of the sites. The intricate social and political systems that supported the ancestral Puebloan culture could have fractured under the pressure of prolonged hardship, leading to migration or even the collapse of entire communities. Migration, too, is often cited as a key factor in the disappearance of the ancestral Puebloans. Archaeological evidence shows that the Puebloans did not simply vanish into the desert. Rather, many of them seem to have migrated southward to the more fertile lands of New Mexico and Arizona. The migration theory suggests that as the climate worsened and resources became more scarce, the ancestral Puebloans were compelled to move in search of better opportunities. The Zuni, Hopi, and Acoma people, who still inhabit the southwestern United States today, are believed by some to be the descendants of the ancestral Puebloans, though the exact nature of this connection remains speculative. Yet, despite these plausible explanations, there are elements of the ancestral Puebloans' disappearance that resist such straightforward answers. For one, why did some of their settlements, particularly those in the more remote canyons and cliffs, remain intact for centuries after their inhabitants left? The preservation of these sites suggests that the decision to abandon them may not have been solely driven by a lack of resources. Furthermore, some of the archaeological sites show signs of ritualistic destruction, as if the people deliberately destroyed certain structures before leaving, which raises the possibility that their departure may have been more intentional and perhaps even linked to spiritual or cultural beliefs. This leads to a more speculative theory, the idea that the ancestral Puebloans might have encountered something beyond their control, a force or event that caused them to leave. Could they have been driven from their homes by an external threat, such as a natural disaster, foreign invaders, or even a spiritual or supernatural force they believed they could not combat? There are stories in Native American folklore that speak of such occurrences, of great migrations, of entire civilizations fleeing in the face of forces beyond their understanding. Though these stories are often framed in myth, they raise intriguing questions about what the ancestral Puebloans may have believed and what they feared. Still, the most captivating theory of all is the idea that the ancestral Puebloans' departure was linked to their deep knowledge of astronomy and the cycles of the Earth. The ancestral Puebloans were exceptional stargazers, with a profound understanding of the movements of the sun, moon, and stars. Could it be that they foresaw a change in the heavens, a celestial event or alignment that they believed would signal the need for a great exodus? The connection between their cosmology and their decision to abandon their homes has long been a subject of fascination, and it is a theory that invites us to consider the possibility that their disappearance was not simply the result of external forces, but rather a part of a much larger, more cosmic plan. As we examine the remnants of their civilization, cliff dwellings, pottery, and remnants of their rituals, we are left with more questions than answers. What really happened to the ancestral Puebloans? Was it the changing climate that drove them from their homes? Or was there something more at play, something deeper, perhaps even spiritual? The mystery of their disappearance, like so many others in the ancient world, continues to puzzle us. And perhaps, as we stand in the shadow of their abandoned cities, we are reminded that some mysteries are not meant to be fully understood. The ancestral Puebloans may have left us more than just the ruins of their homes. They may have left behind a question that remains unsolved, waiting for the day when it might be answered. What drove them to leave, and what might still be hidden in the sands of time? As we leave behind the haunting question of the ancestral Puebloans' disappearance, we now turn our attention to another ancient mystery, one that struck at the heart of the Roman Empire itself, the plague of Cyprian. This mysterious pandemic, which ravaged the empire during the reign of Emperor Marcus Aurelius in the 3rd century AD, is as enigmatic as it is devastating. It is a disease whose origins remain unknown and whose impact continues to puzzle historians and epidemiologists alike. Imagine for a moment the bustling streets of Rome, the great heart of the empire, during the height of its power. The Colosseum stands tall, the Forum is alive with political discourse, and the Via Appia, one of the empire's most important roads, stretches far into the distance. But amidst this thriving metropolis, something sinister begins to unfold. Reports flood in from across the empire of a strange and deadly illness, sweeping through cities and towns with terrifying speed. In 251 AD, the city of Rome was shaken to its core. The plague of Cyprian, named after the Christian bishop Cyprian of Carthage, who wrote a detailed account of the disease's effects, began to take its toll. It was no ordinary disease. It killed quickly and violently, leaving death in its wake, and its symptoms were unlike any plague seen before. It started with a fever, followed by severe pain, diarrhea, and vomiting. People developed ulcerations on their skin, their limbs swollen with inflammation. The disease was characterized by intense gastrointestinal symptoms, and, in many cases, death came swiftly, often within a matter of days. At its peak, the plague of Cyprian claimed the lives of thousands, if not millions, throughout the Roman world. It spread across Europe, Asia, and North Africa, leaving devastation in its wake. Some estimates suggest that the empire lost as much as 1/3 of its population, a blow from which it would never fully recover. Entire regions were emptied, cities abandoned, and the once thriving trade routes fell silent. The plague wreaked havoc not only on the population, but also on the empire's military and economic strength. Armies were decimated, and agricultural production ground to a halt. The loss of life was so catastrophic that it set off a chain reaction of social, political, and economic crises, which would contribute to the eventual decline of the Western Roman Empire. Yet, despite the scale of the tragedy, we know very little about the true origin of the plague of Cyprian. The disease arrived suddenly, spread with shocking speed, and then, just as mysteriously, began to fade away after a few years. Its very nature remains elusive. The question of what exactly caused the plague of Cyprian has never been answered. Some historians and medical experts believe that the disease was likely caused by a viral infection, possibly smallpox or a related virus. The symptoms described by Cyprian, such as the fever, gastrointestinal distress, and skin lesions, align with what we know of smallpox and other similar viruses. However, this theory has its complications. The timelines don't perfectly align, and the disease's rapid spread and its sudden appearance don't seem to match with smallpox as we understand it today. Furthermore, smallpox tends to leave distinctive scarring, which is not consistently noted in ancient descriptions of the plague. Another theory is that the disease was caused by Ebola, a virus that could have caused similar symptoms, including bleeding and rapid deterioration of the body. However, this theory raises as many questions as it answers. The historical record doesn't mention the hemorrhagic symptoms associated with Ebola, and there is no evidence of the virus being known in the ancient world. Furthermore, Ebola outbreaks tend to be geographically confined, whereas the plague of Cyprian spread widely across the Roman Empire, suggesting that it was something more contagious or capable of traveling vast distances. Typhus, caused by bacteria transmitted by lice or fleas, is another possibility that some scholars have explored. The symptoms of typhus, such as fever, skin rashes, and severe fatigue, could align with Cyprian's descriptions. However, the scale and rapidity of the outbreak would have been unprecedented for a bacterial infection like typhus. Additionally, typhus doesn't usually spread as quickly or as broadly as the plague of Cyprian did, making this theory more difficult to accept. Then, there are those who suggest that the plague of Cyprian was not caused by any of these well-known pathogens, but by something entirely different. Could it have been a novel virus? One that was short-lived, emerging suddenly and then disappearing just as mysteriously as it arrived? The Roman Empire, with its extensive trade networks and dense population centers, may have been the perfect incubator for such an outbreak, allowing a new and highly contagious pathogen to spread rapidly. The nature of the disease itself further deepens the mystery. Cyprian's description of the plague's effects is vivid and terrifying, but it's also somewhat inconsistent with what we expect from the diseases we know today. The fever, the abdominal pain, the sores, and the rapid mortality rate don't perfectly align with any one disease. Could it have been a combination of factors, a confluence of environmental conditions, a weakened population, and an unknown pathogen that allowed this plague to unfold in such a devastating way? The role of climate could also play a part in explaining the sudden appearance and spread of the plague. The 3rd century was a time of considerable upheaval in the Roman Empire, both politically and environmentally. The empire was experiencing a period of instability, with multiple emperors coming and going, civil war, and external pressures from barbarian tribes. The climate during this period was also in a state of flux, with some historians suggesting that cooler, wetter conditions may have contributed to the spread of infectious diseases, allowing new pathogens to thrive. Could the changing climate have played a role in enabling the plague of Cyprian to emerge? There is, however, a more speculative theory, that the plague of Cyprian was not simply a biological event, but a sign of divine retribution. Ancient people, particularly in the Roman world, often interpreted such devastating events as the will of the gods. Cyprian himself, a Christian bishop, framed the plague as a test from God, a warning to the people of the empire. This interpretation may not offer a biological or epidemiological explanation, but it does speak to the deep spiritual and cultural fears that surrounded the plague. Even more intriguing are the fringe theories that tie the plague of Cyprian to cosmic events. Some have suggested that solar activity, meteor showers, or other astronomical phenomena could have triggered the outbreak of the plague. While these ideas are speculative and lack concrete evidence, they do tap into the ancient understanding that the heavens were often seen as the realm of omens and divine forces. Was the plague of Cyprian, in some way, connected to events beyond Earth, something that we can only begin to understand? The legacy of the plague of Cyprian is profound. It did not just devastate the Roman Empire, it also left behind a world struggling to make sense of its existence in the face of such a sudden and catastrophic event. And as we look back at the historical accounts, the letters, and the desolate ruins of the time, we are still left with the question, what really caused the plague of Cyprian? Was it a natural disease, an ancient virus, or something else entirely? And in the centuries since, have we missed something? A clue, a forgotten piece of evidence that might finally unravel this mystery? The plague of Cyprian remains one of the great unknowns of ancient history, a question that, despite the advances of modern science, may forever elude us. As we leave behind the mysteries of the plague of Cyprian, we now travel across the waters to the Caribbean island of Barbados, a place known for its sun-drenched beaches, its colonial past, and its vibrant culture. Yet, beneath the tropical beauty lies a strange and unsettling enigma, one that has haunted the island for centuries. This is the story of the moving coffins of Barbados, a tale of death, superstition, and a mystery that continues to puzzle even the most rational minds. The story begins in the small village of Chancery Lane, located on the southern coast of Barbados. It is here, in the 18th century, that a series of unusual events began to unfold, events that would give rise to one of the most eerie legends in Caribbean folklore. In 1807, the community was struck by a strange occurrence. A series of coffins that had been sealed in a local burial vault seemed to move on their own, shifting position inside the tomb. The coffins, which had been carefully placed inside a family tomb, were found displaced from their original positions, as though they had been disturbed by some unseen force. At first, these reports were dismissed as local superstition, strange, exaggerated tales that had no basis in reality. But as the incidents continued, more and more people began to take notice. Coffins that had been sealed for years, even decades, were found out of place, with no logical explanation for their movement. Some were discovered upside down, others shifted as if dragged by invisible hands. The phenomenon did not appear to follow any discernible pattern. What made it all the more baffling was that the tombs were sealed tight, with no apparent way for the coffins to have moved. The phenomenon was particularly unnerving for the people of Chancery Lane, many of whom had deep ties to the land and its long history of burial customs. Barbados, with its rich colonial past, had long been a place where death was treated with great respect, and burial vaults were seen as sacred spaces. The idea that the coffins of the deceased, whose bodies had once been laid to rest with reverence, could somehow be disturbed was a deeply unsettling thought, one that hinted at forces beyond human understanding. In 1807, when the first reports surfaced, the local clergy and community leaders were quick to investigate. The vault was reopened, and the coffins were examined. To the shock of those present, it became clear that the coffins had indeed moved, sometimes even in a way that suggested deliberate force. For some, this was a clear sign of the supernatural. Local legend began to spread, with whispers of restless spirits, curses, and vengeful forces at work. Some believed that the spirits of the dead were attempting to escape their tombs, driven by anger or unresolved business. Others suggested that the disturbances were linked to some form of black magic or ritualistic practices. As the years went on, the phenomenon continued. Reports from other families and nearby villages described similar occurrences. Coffins were seen shifting and rattling in their crypts, often during the night. Some claimed to have heard strange noises coming from the tombs, groans, whispers, and other unearthly sounds, adding to the eerie atmosphere surrounding the phenomenon. But even as the stories of moving coffins spread, explanations began to emerge. Some people pointed to natural causes. The shifting of the earth due to the island's tropical climate, with its seasonal rains and changes in temperature, could have caused the ground to shift, disturbing the tombs. Others suggested that air pressure or the decay of the bodies could have caused the coffins to shift in ways that seemed unnatural, but could be explained by natural forces. Yet, none of these explanations fully accounted for the mystical nature of the events, or the way the coffins were found in such strange positions. It seemed that logic and reason could not explain everything. Despite these more rational theories, the supernatural explanation seemed to gain the most traction among the local population. For many, the events in Chancery Lane were tied to the island's long history of slavery and colonialism, a dark past that had left scars on the land and its people. Some believed that the spirits of slaves, whose lives had been marked by cruelty and oppression, were restless, seeking justice and recognition even in death. Could the moving coffins be a form of spiritual rebellion, a way for the spirits of the past to make their presence felt? But it wasn't just the people of Barbados who were captivated by this mystery. As word spread beyond the island, foreigners, including travelers and anthropologists, came to investigate the strange occurrences. Many of these individuals were skeptical, seeking to uncover the scientific explanation behind the phenomenon. However, even these rational minds were left with more questions than answers. Some theorists suggested that the shifting of the coffins could have been a form of spiritual communication, with the dead attempting to send a message to the living. Others speculated that the movement of the coffins was linked to some kind of ancient ritual that had been forgotten over time. The mystery took on a new layer of intrigue when the tomb of the Hunta family, one of the wealthiest families on the island, became the focal point of the phenomenon. In 1807, after the coffins of the Hunta family members were found to have shifted in their tomb, a series of events unfolded that suggested a deeper, darker force at play. The family, known for their prominence in colonial Barbados, had long been associated with wealth and power, but also with rumors of occult practices. Could these events have been linked to the family's rumored connection to the supernatural? Was there something buried within the tomb that should not have been disturbed? Despite countless investigations over the years, the true cause of the moving coffins remains unknown. Some scholars point to environmental factors, the shifting of the earth or the expansion and contraction of wood and materials. But these explanations fail to account for the strange and seemingly deliberate movements of the coffins. Others have suggested that the entire phenomenon was a misunderstanding, perhaps the result of a series of coincidental events that were later exaggerated into a full-blown legend. Still, the mystery endures. The coffins of Barbados, their unsettling movements, and the eerie atmosphere surrounding them have become an integral part of the island's folklore, a story passed down from generation to generation. And even today, as tourists visit the island and local legends continue to be told, the question remains: what caused the coffins to move? Was it a natural phenomenon, a case of environmental forces at work? Or was there something more at play, something hidden beneath the surface, tied to the island's mysterious past? The moving coffins of Barbados remain one of the most intriguing and unexplained mysteries in Caribbean history. Whether rooted in superstition or grounded in reality, the mystery still beckons, like the shifting sands of time, always just out of reach. As we search for answers, we can't help but wonder, what other secrets might still be buried in the island's soil, waiting to be uncovered? As we leave behind the eerie mystery of the moving coffins in Barbados, we journey into the heart of the Byzantine Empire, a civilization that once bridged the ancient and medieval worlds. Known for its resilience, its art, and its intricate diplomacy, the Byzantine Empire also held a secret that has captivated historians, engineers, and military strategists for centuries: the secret of Greek fire, an ancient weapon whose formula remains lost to history. Picture, if you will, the streets of Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire, circa the 7th century AD. The city is a nexus of power, a glittering jewel at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, surrounded by towering walls and guarded by a vast fleet. The city is alive with the bustling sounds of merchants, the clashing of swords, and the call to prayer echoing across the city. But beneath this veneer of civilization lies a secret weapon that has made the Byzantine Empire nearly invincible at sea. Greek fire, as it was called, was a weapon unlike any other of its time. Described as a type of liquid fire that could burn on water, Greek fire was capable of setting entire fleets ablaze, no matter how vast the sea or how sturdy the ship. It was a weapon of terror, a psychological tool as much as a military one, feared by Byzantium's enemies and revered by its defenders. Yet, despite its power and the pivotal role it played in many Byzantine victories, the formula for Greek fire was never fully understood, and it has been lost to history. The exact composition of Greek fire remains one of the great mysteries of the ancient world. Some accounts suggest that it was a type of petroleum-based compound, capable of being ignited by a spark and continuing to burn even when it came into contact with water. Other sources claim it had a chemical basis, involving substances such as sulfur, quicklime, and naphtha, mixed in ways that could not be easily replicated. What we do know is that Greek fire was deployed in a variety of ways, often using a siphon weapon, a type of primitive flamethrower that could project the fire onto enemy ships, causing chaos and destruction in its wake. The first recorded use of Greek fire occurred in 672 AD, when the Byzantine fleet, under the command of Emperor Constantine IV, faced off against the forces of the Arab Caliphate. The Arabs, who had been sweeping across the Mediterranean with growing power, were struck by the sudden and horrifying appearance of Greek fire on the waters. The Byzantines used the weapon to devastating effect, repelling the Arab navy and securing the empire's position in the eastern Mediterranean. For centuries after, Greek fire continued to be a critical asset in Byzantine naval warfare, used against both Muslim and Christian enemies alike. But here's the question that has perplexed scholars for centuries. What exactly was Greek fire made of? The formulas for Greek fire were never recorded in full detail, and only fragmented references remain in ancient texts. The Byzantine government took extreme measures to keep the formula secret, making it a closely guarded state secret. In fact, the knowledge of Greek fire was likely restricted to a select group of royal officials and military engineers. Even the soldiers who used it in battle were kept in the dark about its composition, further ensuring its secrecy. This air of mystery surrounding Greek fire has led to numerous theories about its ingredients and the process used to create it. Some scholars suggest that Greek fire was a type of oil-based incendiary weapon, possibly derived from petroleum or naphtha, substances that were known to exist in the ancient world, particularly in regions like the Middle East. The use of naphtha, a highly flammable liquid, could explain the weapon's ability to burn on water, a characteristic that made it so effective against ships. Others have proposed that Greek fire was actually a form of chemical warfare, with some speculating that it was a mixture of quicklime, a substance that generates heat when mixed with water, and sulfur. This would create an incredibly dangerous fire that could not be extinguished by traditional means, making it an ideal weapon for naval battles. Some also speculate that it could have been a precursor to modern napalm, using a similar combination of chemicals to create a sticky, burning substance that adhered to enemy ships, soldiers, and anything else it touched. There are even more fringe theories that suggest Greek fire may have involved alchemical processes or a magical element. In the medieval world, knowledge of chemistry and physics was often intertwined with mystical beliefs. Could the Byzantines have used secret knowledge passed down through ancient alchemists? Some texts from the time hint at such ideas, suggesting that the formula for Greek fire might have been tied to the mystical traditions of the era. One of the most compelling aspects of the mystery is the sheer effectiveness of Greek fire in battle. Unlike other weapons of the time, it was not just a tool of destruction, it was a psychological weapon as well. The sight of flames roaring from a siphon, combined with the inability to put out the fire once it had started, created an atmosphere of sheer panic. Soldiers who had never seen such a weapon before would have believed they were facing something supernatural, further heightening the terror it caused. But while Greek fire was a weapon of incredible power, it was also a source of great risk. The very formula that made it so deadly was also dangerous to the user. Accounts from the period describe incidents in which Byzantine soldiers who were tasked with handling the weapon were burned or killed by accidents. In fact, there are reports of entire ships being destroyed by Greek fire, ships that were meant to unleash it but were consumed by the very flames they sought to wield. It is believed that the chemical reactions involved in creating Greek fire could easily get out of control, adding to its reputation as a weapon that was as dangerous to its users as it was to their enemies. As the Byzantine Empire weakened and eventually fell in 1453, the secret of Greek fire was lost, and with it, the formula for this fearsome weapon. Various attempts to reconstruct it over the centuries have failed, with historians and scientists repeatedly coming up short. It remains one of the great, unresolved mysteries of history. Was it simply a matter of the formula being lost through the centuries? Or could there have been something more behind its disappearance? A deliberate effort to erase the knowledge of Greek fire in the aftermath of the empire's fall? Even in modern times, the search for the formula of Greek fire continues. Some researchers believe that it may be possible to recreate the substance using ancient techniques, while others argue that we may never truly understand how the Byzantines created this deadly weapon. The materials and methods used to produce Greek fire remain hidden, and perhaps they are lost to time forever. And so, we are left with a question that has no easy answer. What was Greek fire? Was it an ancient chemical weapon, a product of early alchemical experiments, or something else entirely? We may never fully understand the secret that kept the Byzantine Empire so powerful for centuries, but the mystery of Greek fire remains a testament to the ingenuity, secrecy, and intrigue of one of history's greatest civilizations. As we look back on the shadow of Byzantium, we can't help but wonder what other secrets might have been hidden in the depths of history, waiting to be uncovered. As we leave behind the Byzantine Empire's enigmatic weapon, Greek fire, we now turn our attention to the ancient city of Teotihuacan, one of the most remarkable civilizations of pre-Columbian Mesoamerica. It was a city unlike any other, its streets lined with monumental architecture, its temples towering high above the earth, and its people skilled in arts, crafts, and astronomy. Yet, like so many ancient civilizations, Teotihuacan's power and glory were abruptly shattered, leaving behind a mystery that has confounded historians for centuries: the sudden collapse of its leadership. The city of Teotihuacan, often referred to as the City of the Gods, was at its height in the 1st century AD. Located in the Valley of Mexico, Approximately 30 miles north of modern-day Mexico City, it sprawled over 8 square miles and boasted a population that may have numbered in the hundreds of thousands. At its peak, Teotihuacan was not just a city. It was a cultural and economic powerhouse, influencing vast regions of Mesoamerica. It was the center of a complex society, with grandiose architectural feats like the Pyramid of the Sun and the Pyramid of the Moon, which still stand today as silent testaments to the city's once dominant presence. Teotihuacan was a place of awe and mystery. Its layout, meticulously planned, mirrored the cosmos, with avenues aligned to the sun, the moon, and other celestial bodies. The city's residents were skilled in urban planning, engineering, and art, and Teotihuacan was known for its vibrant murals and intricate sculptures. Trade flourished within its walls, connecting distant regions and cultures, and its influence can be seen in artifacts and architectural styles as far as the Gulf Coast of Mexico and beyond. For centuries, the city thrived, its leaders seemingly capable of holding together a vast and diverse empire. And then, almost inexplicably, something happened. In the early 6th century AD, Teotihuacan's leadership collapsed with stunning rapidity, and the city entered a period of dramatic decline. The once grand metropolis was abandoned, its central leadership disappeared, and the magnificent buildings, once gleaming symbols of power, were set ablaze and left in ruins. What triggered the collapse of Teotihuacan, and why did its leadership vanish so suddenly? The evidence of violence is impossible to ignore. Archaeologists have uncovered signs of arson and destruction at key sites within the city, including the Pyramid of the Sun and the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. Burned offerings, charred buildings, and disarticulated human remains suggest that something catastrophic occurred. The city, which had once seemed impervious to decline, was seemingly overtaken by chaos. But was it an external invasion? Or did internal strife tear the city apart? One of the most widely accepted theories is that Teotihuacan fell victim to a combination of internal political instability and environmental factors. By the 6th century, the empire was grappling with mounting social tension. Overpopulation, resource depletion, and the possible failure of agricultural systems may have created significant stress within the city. Teotihuacan's economy, heavily reliant on agriculture and trade, may have faltered as the surrounding environment became less hospitable. Drought and soil depletion could have severely impacted the city's ability to sustain its large population, leading to unrest among its people. But the collapse was not just economic. The absence of clear evidence regarding the city's rulers after this period has led some researchers to speculate that internal revolts or a succession crisis might have played a key role. Could the elite leadership of Teotihuacan, those who once oversaw the vast city, have been overthrown or assassinated by rival factions? The violence and destruction seen in the archaeological record suggest that, whatever happened, it was violent and abrupt. It's possible that political factions within the city turned on one another, destabilizing an already fragile society. Yet, the mystery deepens because the identity of the rulers of Teotihuacan is still not entirely clear. Their names are lost to history, and no definitive record remains that can tell us what happened to them after the city's collapse. Were the leaders killed in the violence, or did they simply disappear, abandoning their city in the face of insurmountable crisis? Another theory suggests that religious conflict played a significant role in the city's downfall. Teotihuacan was a deeply religious society, centered around the worship of gods like Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, and the storm god Tlaloc. The city's elite were likely the custodians of religious rituals that kept the gods appeased, ensuring prosperity and peace. However, with the strains of social unrest and environmental collapse, it's possible that the people began to lose faith in their leaders, believing that the gods had turned against them. The idea of a religious apocalyptic crisis fits well with the level of destruction observed, as well as the apparent scapegoating of the ruling elite. Could the collapse of Teotihuacan's leadership have been an attempted religious cleansing or a ritualistic purging of the elite by the population, driven by a desperate desire for salvation? This theory, though speculative, is supported by the fact that many of the temples and palaces were deliberately burned and defaced. The destruction of these symbols of leadership could reflect an attempt to erase the old order in favor of a new spiritual direction. The city's architecture itself, with its focus on celestial alignment and ritual, might have become a source of both awe and resentment, leading to a violent rejection of the status quo. Some fringe theories suggest that the collapse could have been the result of an external invasion, perhaps from groups like the Zapotecs or other neighboring peoples who sought to overthrow Teotihuacan's dominance. Though there is little direct evidence of such an invasion, it's possible that the city's large and vulnerable trade routes made it susceptible to external attack. The fact that the collapse of Teotihuacan coincided with the rise of other Mesoamerican cities, such as Tula, has led some to believe that Teotihuacan's political and economic downfall was caused by shifting power dynamics in the region. Yet, what is perhaps most intriguing about the mystery of Teotihuacan's collapse is the lack of clear answers. Unlike other civilizations that have left behind written records or detailed histories, Teotihuacan's downfall remains shrouded in mystery. We have no clear understanding of its leadership or the events that led to its sudden collapse. The reasons for the city's decline remain speculative, pieced together through archaeological fragments, burned structures, and the ambiguous remnants of a once great civilization. The end of Teotihuacan echoes through the centuries, reverberating into the early medieval period of Mesoamerican history. As the city crumbled, it left behind a power vacuum that would eventually be filled by new civilizations, like the Toltecs and the Aztecs, who looked back upon the ruins of Teotihuacan with awe and reverence. The mysterious fall of Teotihuacan served as a cautionary tale, one that echoed through the myths and legends of those who followed. And yet, even now, the question remains: what truly happened to the leadership of Teotihuacan? Was it political turmoil, environmental disaster, or something more mysterious at play? And if so, how did a city that once seemed invincible, with its grand pyramids and celestial knowledge, fall so swiftly into ruin? As the sands of time settle over the once magnificent city, the secrets of Teotihuacan continue to beckon us, hidden beneath layers of history. As we leave behind the enigmatic collapse of Teotihuacan and its vanished leadership, we now find ourselves in early medieval Europe, a time of profound religious fervor, deep superstition, and profound mysteries. The 7th to 10th centuries A.D. marked an era where Europe was slowly emerging from the chaotic aftermath of the fall of the Roman Empire into a new, dark age. Yet, amidst the rise of Christianity and the growing power of the Church, an extraordinary and unsettling phenomenon would take hold: a series of bleeding statues. Imagine walking through a small medieval village in northern Europe, perhaps somewhere in France, Italy, or the Germanic lands, where the air is thick with the scent of incense, the whispers of prayer, and the looming presence of stone figures. Statues of saints, Christ, and the Virgin Mary, carved from marble or wood, sit in churches, chapels, and cloisters. In the dim light of flickering candles, these statues, solemn and silent, are revered by the faithful. But in the midst of this pious atmosphere, a mystery begins to unfold. Blood, real blood, seems to seep from their eyes, hands, or even their mouths. The first recorded case of bleeding statues in medieval Europe occurred in the 6th century, though such occurrences would increase in the centuries that followed, becoming more frequent and more dramatic. Reports of miraculous bleeding statues spread across Europe, reaching the ears of the faithful and igniting waves of religious fervor and awe. These phenomena were typically associated with statues of Christian saints, particularly those of Christ or the Virgin Mary, figures central to the Christian faith. To the devout, the appearance of blood was nothing short of a divine sign, a miracle that seemed to offer a tangible connection between the earthly and the divine. But to others, the sight of blood seeping from stone seemed like an unfathomable mystery, one that even centuries of scholarship and investigation could not fully explain. One of the most famous and documented cases of bleeding statues occurred in the 10th century, in the town of Santiago de Compostela, in what is now modern-day Spain. It was said that a statue of the Virgin Mary, located in a remote chapel, began to bleed from its eyes. The blood, according to witnesses, appeared suddenly and was said to flow in an uninterrupted stream, staining the marble beneath it. The news of the bleeding statue spread rapidly throughout the region, and a pilgrimage began, with people traveling from distant lands to witness the miracle for themselves. Some claimed the blood had a distinct smell, akin to that of human blood, and was believed to possess healing properties, attracting even the sick and the dying. In other parts of Europe, similar occurrences were reported. In Italy, a statue of Christ was said to have bled from its wounds in a small village, while in Germany, a statue of Saint Sebastian was discovered with blood seeping from its arrow wounds. The descriptions of these miracles varied, but they shared certain common elements. Blood, often identified as human, appeared mysteriously from stone or wood, seemingly without explanation. The sight of these miracles often brought crowds of people together, filled with both fear and reverence, hoping for a glimpse of the sacred and the supernatural. To understand these phenomena, we must first consider the medieval worldview. During this period, people lived in a world filled with divine mystery, and the boundaries between the natural and the supernatural were often blurred. Miracles were an accepted part of life, and signs from the divine were thought to be sent to guide, warn, or bless the faithful. To witness a miracle was not just a rare event. It was believed to be a profound moment of divine intervention. For many, the sight of a statue bleeding was a tangible sign of God's grace or a saint's favor, a blessing that validated their faith. But even as many saw these events as divine, others sought explanations that lay outside the supernatural realm. Skeptics have long suggested that these occurrences may have been the result of natural causes or human intervention. Some theorists point to the possibility that the statues themselves may have been constructed from materials that could bleed due to chemical reactions. For example, it's possible that certain types of wood used in statues could have reacted with moisture in the air, causing them to weep. Others argue that animal blood could have been applied to the statues as part of a ritual, either by priests or local healers, in order to create the illusion of a miracle. This theory suggests that the bleeding statues may have been a deliberate attempt to incite religious fervor or to draw attention to particular shrines. Another theory suggests that the blood could have been the result of biological processes, such as the decay of organic matter within the statues, particularly in older wooden figures that might have absorbed animal blood or fluids over time. When exposed to changing temperatures or environmental conditions, the fluids could have been forced out, giving the appearance of bleeding. However, this theory does not explain the vivid and consistent reports of miraculous blood, nor does it account for the belief that some of the blood had the distinct odor and appearance of human blood. There are also mystical explanations, which suggest that the bleeding statues may have been signs from the spiritual realm. Some believe that these events were not merely coincidences or natural phenomena, but deliberate acts of divine communication. Could it be that these statues were vessels through which the saints or Christ themselves chose to manifest their power? Was the blood a symbolic gesture, a way for the divine to reach the people and communicate with them on a more personal and visceral level? In some cases, the bleeding statues were also believed to be linked to prophecy or to warnings about impending disaster or suffering. Some scholars have pointed to the fact that many of these miraculous events occurred during times of social unrest or political instability, suggesting that they may have been divine warnings, a way for God or the saints to signal the people to repent or to change their ways before disaster struck. Despite centuries of research and analysis, there is no definitive explanation for these phenomena. The mystery of the bleeding statues remains unsolved, and the line between miracle and mystery continues to blur. Were these events the product of religious fervor, human manipulation, or something deeper, something that lies beyond the reach of our understanding? The world of early medieval Europe was a place where the boundaries of the natural and the supernatural were porous, where miracles and signs were taken as part of daily life. The question that remains is not only whether the bleeding statues were truly miraculous, but also what these strange events tell us about the way people viewed the divine during this time. As we look back on these mysteries, we are left with an unsettling thought. Could there be more to these stories than we can comprehend? Were the bleeding statues merely the beginning of a series of signs that might yet remain hidden in the annals of history? The mystery endures, calling us to wonder what secrets might still be concealed beneath the layers of time. As we leave behind the unsettling mystery of the bleeding statues of medieval Europe, we turn now to a far more ancient and eerie enigma, an event so disturbing it still casts a shadow over the understanding of human behavior from millennia ago. This is the mystery of Herxheim, a site in modern-day Germany where archaeologists have uncovered evidence that suggests a practice far darker than we might expect from prehistoric societies: cannibalism. Imagine standing on the windswept plains of the Herxheim excavation site. The earth here is quiet now, but beneath the soil, it holds remnants of a civilization that thrived some 7,000 years ago, during the early Neolithic period. The site, though modest in its appearance, reveals a chilling and mysterious aspect of ancient human life. What was once a flourishing settlement in the heart of Central Europe is now remembered not just for its settlements, but for the eerie traces it has left behind. Human bones that show signs of having been cut, scraped, and most disturbingly, eaten. The Herxheim site was first excavated in the early 2000s, and what the team uncovered shocked the archaeological community. Hundreds of human remains, dating from around 5000 BC, were found scattered across a ritualistic pit at the site. The remains were in various stages of dismemberment, many showing clear marks of tool use, and in some cases, signs of having been butchered for consumption. The bones had been cracked open for marrow extraction, and in some instances, human teeth marks were found on the bones. This wasn't simply a case of post-mortem mutilation. It appeared to be something far more deliberate, an act of consumption. As unsettling as this discovery was, it wasn't just the cannibalistic practices that baffled researchers. It was the ritualistic nature of these actions. The remains were not scattered randomly. They were arranged in a pattern, and in some cases, they seemed to be associated with ceremonial structures. The bones placed deliberately in pits that were clearly marked as sacred or symbolic. This suggested that what occurred at Herxheim was not mere survival or opportunistic cannibalism, but something much more complex and troubling. A ritual, perhaps even a form of sacrifice. This raised an immediate question. Why would a society practice such a thing? In many ancient cultures, cannibalism has been linked to rituals of power, control, or reverence. In some cultures, consuming a person's flesh was believed to allow one to absorb their strength or wisdom, while in others, it was a way to honor the dead. The idea that cannibalism could be connected to religious or social practices challenges our understanding of early human societies and compels us to ask whether such acts were a form of spiritual communion, a display of dominance, or perhaps an act of desperation. The evidence at Herxheim leads to some startling theories. The site's use of ritualistic pits and the careful arrangement of human remains suggest a social function. One theory posits that the community at Herxheim might have viewed the practice of cannibalism as a form of ancestor worship, in which the bones of the dead were preserved, consumed, or handled in ways that symbolized a spiritual connection to their ancestors. Could the act of consuming human flesh have been seen as a way to commune with the dead, to harness their power or ensure fertility, prosperity, or protection? Others suggest that the cannibalism at Herxheim was linked to tribal warfare, or the ritualized violence that often accompanies conquest. In this view, cannibalism might have been a way for the victors to assert their dominance over the defeated, not just by killing, but by consuming the remains, an act that would forever mark the defeated as being subjugated. Such rituals could have been designed to dehumanize the enemy, making them less than human, and thus justifying their brutal treatment. There is also a more pragmatic theory, which some archaeologists and anthropologists have put forward, suggesting that the cannibalism at Herxheim could have been driven by a scarcity of food or a ritualistic desperation. The Neolithic period was a time of significant transition in human history, when early farming communities began to rely less on hunting and more on agriculture. However, such transitions were often fraught with difficulties, including crop failure, bad harvests, and the strain of newly forming social structures. Could the cannibalism have been born out of extreme circumstances, where humans turned to consuming their own kind to survive in times of dire need? This hypothesis, while not without merit, also leads us into even deeper questions. If the cannibalism was indeed driven by hunger, why was it so tightly woven into ritual and ceremony? Why did the bones show such clear signs of deliberate preparation? The consumption of human flesh in the context of starvation would likely have been more haphazard and without the careful treatment that the bones of Herxheim exhibit. Another possibility that has garnered attention is the theory of ritualistic sacrifice. In many early cultures, the gods were believed to demand offerings, sometimes human, sometimes symbolic, as a way to ensure favor or avert disaster. The practice of human sacrifice, though largely associated with later civilizations such as the Aztecs, was not unknown in earlier periods. Could it be that the people of Herxheim believed that consuming the flesh of the deceased would somehow please the gods, bringing blessings or perhaps even averting a calamity? The mystery deepens when considering the people of Herxheim themselves. Who were they? The linear pottery culture, to which the inhabitants of Herxheim likely belonged, is known for its distinctive pottery and early farming practices. Yet, this was also a culture marked by violent conflict and perhaps ritualistic practices that have left their mark in the archaeological record. What was it about their worldview, their spiritual beliefs, that led them to carry out such macabre rituals? As is often the case with ancient mysteries, the evidence is fragmentary and subject to interpretation. While the bones at Herxheim tell a disturbing story, they do not provide us with all the answers. The motivations behind the cannibalism remain elusive, and what is clear is that the people of Herxheim were involved in a world that we can barely comprehend, a world where death, sacrifice, and the sacred were intertwined in ways that challenge modern sensibilities. Even now, Herxheim stands as a dark enigma, its full meaning lost to the ages. Was this a society in desperate need, or were these rituals an essential part of their cultural identity? What, if anything, do the remains of Herxheim reveal about the earliest forms of human spirituality, and how do they connect to other ancient practices of sacrifice and consumption? The answers are buried beneath the soil of this quiet site, leaving us with a lingering question. Was the cannibalism at Herxheim a desperate act for survival, a symbolic ritual, or something else entirely? The lines between survival, ritual, and power are blurred in this disturbing glimpse into our distant past. As the shadows of history lengthen, the truth about Herxheim may remain forever elusive, leaving us to wonder just how much of the ancient world we truly understand. As we leave behind the chilling evidence of ritualistic practices at Herxheim, we now turn our focus to another enigmatic loss, one that resonates through history and culture to this very day. Imagine, if you will, the mighty walls of Constantinople, a city that stood as the heart of the Eastern Roman Empire, later to be known as the Byzantine Empire. Here, within the city's imperial palaces and churches, was a vast collection of knowledge and wisdom, compiled over centuries, a treasure trove of manuscripts, scrolls, and codices. This was the Great Library of Constantinople, a repository of learning that, according to some accounts, rivaled even the legendary Library of Alexandria. At the height of the Byzantine Empire, Constantinople was more than just a political and military capital. It was a hub of culture and intellectual pursuit. In the 5th century AD, Emperor Theodosius II is said to have founded the Imperial Library of Constantinople, which housed thousands of manuscripts from the ancient world, including works of philosophy, science, history, and literature. Within its shelves, scholars sought to preserve the knowledge of the past, hoping to transmit it to future generations. Yet, despite the imperial patronage and reverence for learning, this great repository of wisdom would face a tragic and mysterious fate, a fate entwined with the fires that ravaged the city during times of war and upheaval. The first of these catastrophic fires occurred in the 8th century, when the city was under the threat of invasion from the Arabs. This fire, which some historians believe destroyed a significant portion of the library's collections, marked the first major loss. Accounts from the time suggest that flames consumed not just the structures of the library, but also irreplaceable manuscripts, scrolls containing knowledge from Greek philosophy and the works of ancient Roman scholars. The fire may have been started during the Arab sieges, but it could also have been part of the chaotic backdrop of shifting power and religion in the region, where intellectual and cultural artifacts were often caught in the crossfire of religious and political conflict. The story of the Roman library's destruction, however, does not end there. The Great Library of Constantinople continued to endure, and it was rebuilt in some form, albeit with fewer manuscripts. Yet it was not immune to the political and military turbulence that would come in the centuries following. In 1204, during the infamous Fourth Crusade, Constantinople was sacked by Western Crusaders, who, rather than seeking to liberate the city, looted it, leaving it in ruins. This was a second, perhaps final blow to the Great Library. Books, scrolls, and manuscripts that had survived the earlier fires were looted or destroyed in the chaos. After this event, historical records about the library grow increasingly sparse. The once great collection of knowledge, carefully cultivated by generations of Byzantine scholars, was lost to the flames of war and to time itself. But, like so many mysteries of history, the exact extent of the destruction remains unclear. Was the library entirely destroyed? Or did fragments of it survive, hidden from view in the wreckage? Could there still be unknown texts buried beneath the ruins of Constantinople, waiting to be uncovered? It's a question that lingers, especially considering that later Byzantine emperors, including those in the 14th century, are said to have made efforts to restore the library. But the task was monumental, and the library's original contents were never fully recovered. There are reports from later Byzantine scholars who claim that some texts from the library were preserved, but these are fragmentary and often unverified. In fact, the entire history of the library's final fate has become a mixture of myth, speculation, and fact. Historians have long debated whether any copies of the works housed there, particularly those from the Greek and Roman periods, might have survived. Some believe that portions of the library's contents may have been passed down through medieval monasteries in the eastern Mediterranean. Others contend that these works could have been spread across the Muslim world during the Arab conquests. So, what exactly happened to the lost knowledge of Constantinople's library? One theory suggests that the loss was gradual, with individual scrolls or books being lost to fire, neglect, and plunder over time, until little of the original collection remained. It's possible that some manuscripts were preserved and eventually made their way into other collections, such as those in Venice or Rome, where they were copied and transcribed by later scholars. But if that were the case, why do so many of these works remain elusive? Why, after centuries of searching, have so few of these manuscripts been found? Another theory points to the possibility that the destruction of the library was part of a broader effort to suppress knowledge. During the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church exerted immense control over intellectual life in Europe, and many classical texts were considered dangerous or heretical. Could it be that the Byzantine rulers, aware of the political and religious ramifications, sought to limit the availability of certain manuscripts, either by destroying them outright or hiding them from prying eyes? If so, what might have been so important in those texts that it was worth going to such lengths to suppress them? Then there is the more mystical interpretation of the loss. Some believe that the Library of Constantinople, due to its vast collection, might have held hidden knowledge not only of the classical world, but perhaps of ancient mysteries or occult wisdom. This theory suggests that the fire and the subsequent destruction were not merely accidental. They were part of a larger, orchestrated effort to erase knowledge that was seen as too dangerous or too powerful for public consumption. Could the lost works of the library contain something that the powers of the time did not want uncovered? Something so profound that its destruction became necessary? Perhaps the most haunting possibility is that some of the scrolls and manuscripts never perished in the fire at all. Could some texts have been hidden away in secret vaults beneath the city, buried for centuries in an attempt to preserve the knowledge they contained? While no hard evidence has surfaced to confirm such a theory, there are certainly historical precedents for works of great importance being hidden from the public eye to avoid destruction. If such texts exist, are they still buried beneath the ruins of Constantinople? What mysteries do they contain, and could they ever see the light of day again? The truth about the lost library of Constantinople remains obscured by centuries of war, fire, and neglect. The greatest repository of ancient Roman knowledge is, for the most part, lost to history, leaving us to wonder how much we will never know about the classical world. Perhaps the greatest mystery of all is not just the library's fate, but the knowledge it may have held, waiting for someone to uncover it. As we move forward in history's unfolding narrative, we are left to ask, what secrets of the ancient world have been lost to the flames of war, and how much of our understanding of history remains hidden, waiting to be discovered in the ashes of a long-forgotten past? The loss of the Library of Constantinople is a reminder that even the greatest civilizations are vulnerable to time's ravages. What remains hidden beneath the ruins might still have the power to reshape our understanding of history. After the devastating loss of knowledge at the Library of Constantinople, we now shift to another mysterious event from the depths of history, an event that, much like the fire-ravaged library, has left only fragmentary clues in its wake. This is the mysterious death of Emperor Valentinian II, one of the last emperors to rule over the fragmented Roman Empire in the late 4th century AD. To fully understand the gravity of this mystery, one must first step back into the world of Constantinople, Milan, and Rome, 3 cities at the heart of the Roman Empire. The date is 392 AD, and the Roman Empire is at a crossroads. The Western Roman Empire, weakened by internal strife, economic turmoil, and barbarian invasions, is teetering on the brink of collapse. In the midst of this, Valentinian II, a young emperor, ascends to the throne at just 4 years old, following the death of his father, Valentinian I. The empire is left in the hands of regents, and despite his youth, Valentinian II eventually takes control, though his reign remains marked by instability. The emperor, who governed from Milan, faced considerable challenges. The western portion of the empire was besieged by internal political rivalries and religious conflicts, most notably between pagans and Christians, with the rise of Christianity under Emperor Theodosius I slowly eroding the power of the ancient Roman gods. As Valentinian II grew older, the political environment became increasingly perilous, with factions vying for power. It's clear that he was, in many ways, a figurehead, controlled by powerful men like Flavius Eugenius and his mother Justina. But as with so many figures in history, it is Valentinian II's death that continues to haunt historians. The circumstances surrounding his demise remain one of the most puzzling and controversial in the annals of the Roman Empire. In 392 AD, Valentinian II was found dead in his chambers, his body hanging by a rope tied to the ceiling. The official explanation at the time, one that was largely accepted by the empire, was that the emperor had committed suicide. But as with many of history's most mysterious deaths, this explanation raises more questions than it answers. The story goes that Valentinian II, troubled by political conflicts and the weight of ruling an empire already in decline, chose to end his own life. His regents were said to have been distant from his rule, leaving him to face the strain of power alone. Yet, the unexplained nature of his death quickly led to rumors that painted a far darker picture. Some believed that the emperor had been murdered, perhaps by those within his court who saw him as a weak ruler, one who had failed to stop the rise of Theodosius I, or curtail the growing power of Christianity. For much of history, the official narrative was accepted. However, the nature of Valentinian II's death left room for speculation. Was it truly a suicide, or was it a carefully orchestrated assassination? If it was murder, who stood to gain from his untimely demise? One prominent theory is that Valentinian II was murdered by his own ministers. Arbogast, the powerful military commander who had once been Valentinian II's guardian, was said to have played a role in the emperor's downfall. Arbogast, a Frankish general, had a tenuous relationship with Valentinian II, and some scholars suggest that his ambition to control the empire may have led him to eliminate the young emperor. The idea that Arbogast, along with others in the court, could have staged the emperor's suicide to mask a brutal coup fits with the political intrigue of the time. Valentinian II was not merely a weak emperor. He was a puppet controlled by factions that had little interest in seeing him thrive. This theory is supported by a rather disturbing detail. After Valentinian II's death, Arbogast declared himself the ruler of the Western Roman Empire, placing the region under his control. But despite his newfound power, Arbogast was careful not to declare himself emperor outright. Instead, he installed a puppet ruler, Eugenius, as a figurehead. This act raised even more suspicion about Arbogast's role in the emperor's death, suggesting that Valentinian II's demise was more than just a personal tragedy. It was part of a much larger political game. However, there are other theories that complicate this narrative. Some historians believe that Theodosius I, the Eastern Roman Emperor, may have played a role in Valentinian II's death. Theodosius had long clashed with Valentinian II, and after the emperor's death, Theodosius took full control of the western part of the empire, effectively consolidating his own power. Did Theodosius view Valentinian II as a rival or a threat to his reign, and did he orchestrate the emperor's death to remove him from the scene? The relationship between Theodosius and Valentinian II remains a mystery, and there are those who argue that Theodosius, eager to maintain his grip on power, may have found it expedient to rid himself of Valentinian II. But could Valentinian II's death have been more personal, an act of despair or mental exhaustion? Some argue that the young emperor, who had spent much of his reign under the thumb of strong-willed regents, could have succumbed to the weight of his circumstances. The pressures of ruling an empire in decline, coupled with his increasing isolation, might have driven Valentinian II to take his own life. If this was indeed the case, then the emperor's death could be viewed as the tragic end of a reign marked by political instability and spiritual upheaval, a world in which the emperor's personal despair mirrored the state of the empire itself. Still, questions remain. If Valentinian II truly committed suicide, why was his death so mysterious? The young emperor was found dead in a manner that seemed uncharacteristic of a simple act of despair. The use of a rope, his body hanging in such a deliberate and calculated manner, has led many to wonder whether this was a staged suicide, designed to cover up a more sinister act. Furthermore, the rapid move by Arbogast and Eugenius to secure power after Valentinian II's death suggests that his death was not just a personal tragedy, but a political maneuver of great significance. For centuries, the death of Emperor Valentinian II has remained a mystery. Was it the act of a young ruler overwhelmed by his own failures? Or was it the result of a deadly power struggle among those closest to him? The answers may never be fully known, but one thing is certain. Valentinian II's death remains one of the great unresolved enigmas of Roman history. The line between political intrigue and personal tragedy is often blurred in the stories of great leaders. Valentinian II's death, with all its unanswered questions, stands as a reminder that sometimes the most telling moments in history are the ones left shrouded in mystery. What drove the young emperor to his untimely end, and who truly stood behind it? The truth may still lie hidden, waiting for a future historian to uncover the secrets that time has left behind. From the mysterious death of Emperor Valentinian II, we now turn to a far more ancient enigma, a kingdom that once thrived but whose disappearance has baffled historians and archaeologists alike. This is the kingdom of Dđmt, an ancient civilization that flourished in the northern regions of modern-day Ethiopia and Eritrea, but whose sudden disappearance remains one of the most elusive mysteries of the ancient world. Imagine standing on the rugged hills of the highlands of Tigray, a place where the landscape bears the scars of millennia. The air here is thick with the history of civilizations that once dominated the region, ancient ruins scattered across the land, as though telling a story that has been lost to time. On these hills you might come across the remnants of what is believed to be the capital of the kingdom of Dđmt, the city of Yeha. This city, which dates back to the 8th century BC, was a thriving center of commerce, culture, and power. Its towering temples and intricate architecture hint at the grandeur of a kingdom that ruled for centuries. And yet, little is known about its people, its rulers, or how it met its untimely end. The kingdom of Dđmt first emerges in history through the accounts of its contemporaries, Egyptian texts and inscriptions from the kingdom of Saba in the southern Arabian Peninsula. Dđmt is believed to have been a powerful kingdom, strategically located at the crossroads of trade between Africa, Arabia, and the Mediterranean world. For centuries, it thrived on the trade of luxury goods such as frankincense, myrrh, and gold, making it a key player in the ancient world's economy. In fact, the kingdom's relationship with Saba, as well as Egypt, is one of the key indicators of its importance. Inscribed monuments from this era suggest that the kingdom was a significant player in the international politics of the time. But just as quickly as it rose, it vanished, leaving behind only tantalizing remnants and a long list of unanswered questions. The first mystery is the identity of its rulers. Very little is known about the kings and queens of Dđmt. What is clear, however, is that the kingdom had a strong connection to the Sabian kingdom of South Arabia, with shared cultural and religious practices. The Sabians were known for their powerful trading networks, and it's likely that the people of Dđmt benefited from these connections. Archaeological evidence suggests that Dğmt had a similar Semitic language and script to that of the Sabaeans, which further supports the idea of a close relationship between the two civilizations. The Yeha Temple, a monumental structure that has survived the ravages of time, shows signs of Sabaean influence in its construction style and rituals. Yet, despite these cultural connections, there is no definitive record of the kingdom's founding or its ruling dynasty. The lack of written texts or inscriptions from the kingdom's own rulers means that historians can only speculate about its political structure, its rulers, and how it functioned. While Egyptian texts mention a kingdom known as Punt, which some believe may have been related to Dğmt, there is no clear evidence that this was the same kingdom. The absence of royal decrees or detailed historical accounts leaves us with more questions than answers. The second mystery centers around the disappearance of the kingdom of Dğmt. Despite its early prosperity, the kingdom vanished by the 4th century BC. This period of decline remains largely unexplained. Some suggest that the decline of Dğmt was linked to environmental factors, such as climate change or resource depletion. Evidence suggests that deforestation in the region, possibly brought on by the expansion of agricultural practices, could have led to soil erosion and a loss of arable land, which would have significantly undermined the kingdom's ability to support its population. Such environmental challenges could have made it difficult to maintain trade routes or provide for a growing population. Others speculate that the rise of neighboring kingdoms, particularly the Aksumite kingdom, played a role in Dğmt's decline. The Aksumites, who ruled over much of modern-day Ethiopia and Eritrea, were a powerful force in the region and eventually came to dominate the area once controlled by Dğmt. Could the Aksumites have overthrown Dğmt through military conquest? Or was the kingdom absorbed peacefully, its influence subsumed into the larger, more powerful Aksumite state? But even these explanations seem too simplistic, and they fail to account for the mysterious nature of Dğmt's disappearance. What happened to the people who once populated this great kingdom? Were they displaced, assimilated into other cultures, or did they vanish entirely? Some scholars suggest that the collapse of Dğmt could have been the result of internal strife, possibly a civil war that fractured the kingdom from within. Yet, again, there is no direct evidence to support this theory. Another intriguing possibility lies in the idea that Dğmt's disappearance was tied to the rise of Christianity in the region. The Aksumite Empire would eventually become one of the first states in the world to adopt Christianity as its official religion in the early 4th century AD. Some theorize that the kingdom of Dğmt may have been a pagan society, and that the rise of Christianity could have played a role in its downfall. Was Dğmt absorbed into the Aksumite state as part of a larger religious and cultural shift? However, no historical records explicitly connect the fall of Dğmt with the rise of Christianity, and it remains a speculative theory. What is clear is that, by the time the Aksumite kingdom began to rise to prominence, Dğmt had already disappeared from the historical stage. The third layer of this mystery lies in the archaeological evidence left behind. The ruins of Yeha provide some of the most significant insights into the kingdom of Dğmt, yet they only raise more questions. The Yeha Temple, a structure that stands as a testament to the kingdom's power and religious practices, appears to have been constructed with incredible skill. The use of massive stone blocks and intricate carvings suggest a people with advanced knowledge of engineering and architecture. Yet the temple was eventually abandoned, and there is little to no evidence of what happened to those who once worshipped there. Archaeological excavations have uncovered pottery, inscriptions, and tools, but none of these items provide clear answers about the kingdom's eventual fate. Why did such a once thriving civilization leave behind only remnants? Were the people of Dğmt forced to abandon their cities suddenly? Or did the culture gradually fade, leaving behind only the ruins we see today? As with many ancient civilizations, The mystery of the kingdom of Dґmt remains unsolved. The reasons for its rise and fall remain elusive, and the kingdom's disappearance is shrouded in historical darkness. Was it the result of environmental collapse, internal conflict, or the expansion of neighboring powers? Or is there still more to uncover, hidden in the ancient stones of Yeha or in the whispers of forgotten texts that might one day be rediscovered? The disappearance of Dґmt remains one of the most intriguing enigmas in ancient history, and its answers may be buried beneath the sands of time, waiting to be unearthed. Could the clues to its demise still be hidden, waiting for a keen-eyed archaeologist to uncover the truth? And what else might we learn about the ancient civilizations that once ruled the highlands of Ethiopia and Eritrea? The answers, it seems, are still lost to history, waiting for the right questions to be asked. Following the mystery of the kingdom of Dґmt, we now journey forward in time to a 13th century event that has baffled historians, scientists, and even skeptics for centuries. This is the tale of the unexplained lights that appeared over the skies of Nuremberg, Germany in 1561, a strange phenomenon recorded in vivid detail by the people who witnessed it. It is a story not just of lights in the sky, but of fear, awe, and the unknown. A reminder that, even in the early days of the Renaissance, there were still mysteries that no one could explain. Imagine, if you will, standing in the middle of Nuremberg, the wealthy and influential city that was a hub of trade and culture in the Holy Roman Empire. The year is 1561, and the city's bustling marketplace, vibrant streets, and towering structures are about to be thrust into a strange and inexplicable event. One that would be recorded for posterity, and one that would leave future generations questioning the true nature of what occurred. On the morning of April 14th, 1561, the people of Nuremberg awoke to find themselves witnesses to a celestial spectacle unlike anything they had ever seen before. According to contemporary records, strange lights filled the sky, a phenomenon so extraordinary that it would soon be immortalized in woodcuts and written accounts that have survived the centuries. The event was described as a battle of lights, a dazzling array of orbs, disks, and cylindrical shapes flying across the sky in patterns that seemed to defy natural explanation. The celestial display began at dawn, and according to the chronicles of the time, the sky above Nuremberg was filled with bright red, black, and white objects that seemed to engage in some form of aerial conflict. Some witnesses claimed that the objects appeared to be fighting, as if engaged in a violent struggle. Others described the lights as appearing suddenly, as though they were simply manifesting out of nowhere. Witnesses spoke of objects that looked like crosses or spinning discs, many of them moving erratically, swarming across the sky as if following some hidden, unseen force. Sparks were said to fly from these objects, and smoke was reported to emanate from them, further adding to the eerie nature of the event. What made this sight so perplexing was not only its nature, but the collective response to it. The people of Nuremberg, seeing what appeared to be a battle in the heavens, feared the worst. They believed that this celestial struggle was a sign of impending divine wrath or doomsday. In the midst of this spectacle, church leaders and town officials were consulted, but no one could offer an explanation. Some said it was a sign from God. Others believed it was a sign of a coming conflict, but no one truly knew what they were witnessing. This strange occurrence was recorded by Hans Glaser, a Nuremberg printer, who created a detailed woodcut that depicted the celestial battle. The image shows numerous spherical objects, some engaged in combat, with others apparently falling toward the earth. Glaser's work became one of the most famous visual records of the event, and it raised many questions, some of which have never been answered. The problem with the Nuremberg lights, however, is that no one seems to have fully understood what they were. While some accounts suggest that the phenomenon could have been caused by meteorological or astronomical events, these explanations do little to account for the highly unusual nature of the spectacle. Could it have been an atmospheric event such as a solar reflection or a comet passing through the atmosphere? Some scientists have posited that the strange lights could have been a phenomenon known as ball lightning, a rare electrical event where spheres of light or electricity appear in the sky during thunderstorms. Yet, ball lightning, if that's what it was, typically does not appear in the orderly, dramatic fashion described by eyewitnesses. Others suggest that the lights may have been a combination of phenomena, including halos or sundogs, optical effects caused by the reflection of sunlight on ice crystals in the atmosphere. But even if we accept these explanations, they still fail to account for the complexity and behavior of the lights as they were described. The objects, moving in formation, spinning, and even appearing to engage in conflict, seem to defy natural explanations of weather patterns or atmospheric optics. Perhaps the most intriguing possibility is that the lights were not natural at all, but the result of something far more extraordinary. Some theories, especially those found in the fringes of UFO lore, suggest that the lights were the result of an extraterrestrial presence, perhaps a fleet of UFOs engaging in a celestial battle above the city. Given the unusual patterns of movement and the sheer scale of the event, it is not entirely outside the realm of possibility that, in the minds of those who witnessed it, the Nuremberg lights were interpreted as something of otherworldly origin. Was it possible that this strange phenomenon was connected to something far beyond the ordinary? A glimpse of something that was never meant to be understood by human eyes? While no hard evidence of extraterrestrial activity in Nuremberg has been found, the sheer oddity of the event continues to stir curiosity among those who study historical mysteries. One of the more speculative theories suggests that the lights may have been a military test or an experiment gone awry. In the years following the Nuremberg event, the region saw the development of early gunpowder-based weaponry and fireworks, and some theorists have suggested that the lights could have been a form of aerial combat demonstration, either a practice run or a misfire of a weapon experiment. However, this theory too lacks solid evidence, and it's unclear how a civilian population would have mistaken aerial displays for something so extraordinary. Perhaps, in the end, the Nuremberg lights were simply an example of human interpretation of an event that seemed beyond comprehension. Were these strange celestial objects just misunderstood natural phenomena, or did they represent something more otherworldly, something beyond the scope of 16th century understanding? The records of the event, like the woodcut by Glaser, continue to raise as many questions as they answer. The possibility that this mysterious event might have been caused by a simple meteorological condition is certainly plausible, but does that explanation fully account for the collective reaction of an entire city in the midst of the spectacle? Was this just an atmospheric anomaly, or was it a deeper, more profound message sent from the heavens? As time marches forward, the strange lights over Nuremberg remain a puzzle, a moment in history that still invites speculation, reflection, and curiosity. What was it, and why has it been so difficult to explain? There is still much to uncover in the skies above us, and perhaps, one day, the full story of the Nuremberg lights will finally be revealed. Until then, we are left to wonder what they truly were, and what mysteries still lie hidden in the skies above. As we move from the unexplained lights in Nuremberg, we now journey back to an ancient burial site in the heart of Suffolk, England, a site that holds within it not only remarkable archaeological finds, but also an unsettling legacy of what some have come to call the Curse of Sutton Hoo. This enigmatic burial, discovered in the summer of 1939, is the stuff of legends, where the grave of an unknown Anglo-Saxon king lay undisturbed for centuries, only to be unearthed just before the outbreak of World War II. The site itself is set within the rolling, tranquil landscape of the Sutton Hoo estate, a place where the earth meets the sky in an almost ethereal silence. It is a world of grassy mounds and gentle hills, where the winds sweep across the lush terrain, carrying whispers from a time long past. Amidst this serene beauty, one can easily imagine that the land holds secrets, buried deep beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to be uncovered. But beneath the calm lies a story filled with mystery, and perhaps even a touch of dread. The Sutton Hoo burial was discovered when archaeologist Basil Brown, working for the British Museum, began excavating a series of mysterious mounds that dotted the landscape of the estate. In 1939, what he unearthed was not just a grave, but a treasure trove, a remarkably well-preserved Anglo-Saxon ship burial. The site contained extravagant treasures, including gold, silver, weapons, and armor, as well as the most incredible discovery of all, a helmet thought to belong to a king. The burial mound, which was later identified as the final resting place of a powerful ruler, seemed to offer a window into the 6th or 7th century Anglo-Saxon world, providing valuable insights into the life and death of a once great warrior king. But the wealth of treasure found within the mound also sparked questions about who this king was, and more ominously, about the strange events that seemed to follow the excavation. At the heart of the mystery lies the identity of the king. Was he Raedwald, the king of East Anglia, as some scholars believe? Or was he a lesser-known figure whose identity is lost to history? What is known for certain is that the burial was of a ruler of great significance, someone who commanded the loyalty and respect of his people. The ship in which the king was buried, a 27-foot-long vessel, a symbol of power, status, and journey to the afterlife, was buried with a vast array of luxurious items that spoke to the wealth and influence of the deceased. However, it is not the treasures alone that have given the Sutton Hoo burial its sinister reputation. In the years following the discovery, rumors began to circulate about a curse attached to the site. People who had been involved in the excavation or who had worked on the site seemed to meet untimely ends, with some dying in strange or unexplained circumstances. Was it simply coincidence, or was there something more at work here? Something that the ancient burial had left behind, something that could not be exhumed without consequence. The most famous and chilling tale surrounding the so-called curse is that of Basil Brown, the archaeologist who first unearthed the burial. While Brown himself did not appear to fall victim to the curse, the event marked a period of sudden death and misfortune that seemed to follow others connected to the site. Shortly after the discovery, the World War II outbreak forced a halt to further excavations, leaving many with the feeling that the burial had been prematurely disturbed. But in the years that followed, the British Museum continued its investigation, and some who were involved in the work would find themselves facing tragic ends. Among those connected to the discovery was Mrs. Peggy Piggott, one of the key archaeologists working at the site. In a tragic turn of fate, she and her husband, Philip Piggott, both prominent in the excavation, experienced a series of personal losses that some attributed to the curse of Sutton Hoo. Philip Piggott, who had worked tirelessly on the site, would tragically take his own life, a death that left many in the archaeological community wondering if something more than simple coincidence was at play. It was not just the excavators who seemed to be affected by this supposed curse. Others associated with the discovery reported strange occurrences. Some who entered the burial mound felt an overwhelming sense of unease, as though they were being watched by unseen eyes. Still others experienced bizarre physical sensations, sudden chills, inexplicable dizziness, or even visions. But were these occurrences truly the result of a curse, or was there something more psychological at play, driven by the sheer weight of what had been uncovered? The most logical explanation for these events would be simple coincidence. After all, war, personal tragedies, and the stresses of living through a tumultuous period could easily explain the string of unfortunate deaths and strange experiences. But the eerie connection between the burial, the treasures it contained, and the misfortunes of those who came into contact with it cannot be easily dismissed. Then there are the more speculative theories. Some have wondered whether the curse is rooted in ancient beliefs tied to the burial itself. The Sutton Hoo king, if indeed it was Redwald, was buried with treasures meant to accompany him to the afterlife. The people of his time likely believed in a sacred protection over the grave, one that was meant to ensure the king's journey was undisturbed. By disturbing the grave, were the archaeologists unwittingly inviting the wrath of an ancient power? Was the curse a manifestation of that ancient protection, awakened by the disturbance of the dead? Others have proposed more psychological explanations, suggesting that the curse was a product of the mysticism surrounding the site, a kind of mass suggestion that the excavation had awoken something ancient and forbidden. The sheer wealth and power associated with the tomb, along with the strangeness of the treasures it contained, may have created a supernatural narrative that took on a life of its own. Yet, despite the many theories, no one can say for certain what truly happened. Did a curse follow the Sutton Hoo excavation, or were the deaths simply the product of misfortune, stress, and a world on the brink of war? The strange series of events connected to the site leave us questioning the line between the supernatural and the natural, between coincidence and mystery. The Sutton Hoo burial remains one of the most important archaeological discoveries of the 20th century, but it also continues to serve as a reminder that some mysteries are never fully explained. Some stories remain shrouded in secrecy. What exactly did the Sutton Hoo burial hold? And could it be that, buried along with the treasures, was something far more mysterious than anyone could have imagined? Something that, perhaps, remains undisturbed for a reason. Following the curse of Sutton Hoo, we now turn our attention to a mystery that stretches back thousands of years, deep into the heart of North America, where a civilization, once thriving and bustling, seemingly disappeared without a trace. This is the enigma of Cahokia and its precursor settlements. At its height, Cahokia was the largest pre-Columbian settlement north of Mexico, a city of grandeur, complexity, and sophistication, yet it is surrounded by an unsettling mystery, the abandonment of its precursor settlements long before the city itself collapsed. Picture, if you will, the vast Mississippi River winding through the landscape, cutting a path through the central United States. Just outside modern-day St. Louis, near the confluence of the Missouri and Mississippi rivers, lies the site of what was once the most populous urban center of ancient North America. Cahokia, with its mound structures, intricate earthworks, and vast urban grid, was home to a thriving society of thousands, flourishing between 1050 and 1350 AD. Yet long before the great mound city reached its peak, its precursor settlements, scattered across the region, disappeared, seemingly abandoned overnight. Cahokia itself, with its towering monk's mound, believed to be the largest pre-Columbian earthwork in North America, and its precise urban layout speaks to the complexity of this ancient society. Wooden temples once stood on top of the mounds, their carvings and rituals offering clues about the culture that built them. However, the most fascinating aspect of this civilization may not lie in its monumental achievements, but rather in the mystery of how and why it was abandoned. It's as though, in the wake of its rise, there was an unseen force, whether natural or human, that caused its precursors to vanish and disappear, leaving only their earthworks behind. It is the story of these early settlements, the communities that preceded Cahokia, that has left archaeologists and historians puzzled. These smaller settlements were once bustling hubs of trade, agriculture, and culture, their residents laying the foundations for the future city of Cahokia. Yet, by around 1050 AD, these settlements seem to have suddenly been abandoned, with no clear reason why. Why would a society, seemingly thriving and progressing, choose to leave their homes and migrate elsewhere? And why would they leave behind such vital traces of their existence? The evidence that these settlements existed is everywhere. Archaeological digs have uncovered remnants of ancient houses, tools, and ceramics, artifacts that paint a picture of a complex society. The people of these settlements were skilled in agriculture, growing corn, beans, and squash, as well as hunting and fishing. Their lives were tied to the land, their cities located near fertile riverbanks, ideal for supporting a thriving population. But despite these promising conditions, the abandonment of these settlements remains an unsolved puzzle. Theories as to the cause of this sudden abandonment are numerous, but none of them offer a definitive answer. Could it have been the result of environmental changes? In recent decades, researchers have focused on the possibility that the people of these settlements faced a dramatic shift in climate, perhaps a drought or flooding that made their lands untenable. Some believe that a severe weather event could have disrupted agriculture and caused the settlements to collapse, forcing the people to migrate in search of better land. Evidence of climate shifts has been found in the paleoclimatic data, patterns that suggest a period of climatic instability around the time the settlements were abandoned. However, while this theory offers a plausible explanation, it still leaves many questions unanswered. If a climate shift was the cause, why would these people leave their homes and not attempt to adapt or move to other parts of the landscape? Could there have been something more to the story? Something deeper and more complex than a simple environmental challenge? Alternatively, some have suggested that the cause of the abandonment could be related to social upheaval. Was it possible that internal strife or political turmoil drove the people to abandon their settlements? Perhaps a power struggle or the rise of a more dominant force led to the disruption of these early communities. However, there is little archaeological evidence to support this theory, as most of the settlements appear to have been abandoned rather than destroyed. The unwritten history of these societies leaves us only with speculation, but what is certain is that the suddenness of their disappearance raises questions about the forces that shaped these people's lives. Then there is the theory of external conflict. Could the precursor settlements have been overtaken by another group of people? Were they forced to flee from an outside force, perhaps another tribal group, or even an invading force? Evidence of conflict and warfare is scarce, but the presence of fortifications and defensive structures at certain sites suggests that there may have been tensions in the region. If this was the case, it raises yet another mystery. Why did the Cahokians build their massive city in a region already home to competing groups? Yet, one of the more fringe theories posits a far more dramatic and unexplained cause for the sudden abandonment. The idea of a supernatural force or some form of divine retribution. Could the ancient people of Cahokia have believed in a punishment from the gods? Did they leave their homes in the face of prophecies or a cultural belief that warned of impending destruction if they did not act? The lack of written records makes it impossible to know for sure, but it's a theory that, for some, evokes a sense of the mystical, the unseen forces that often govern ancient beliefs. Despite all the theories, the truth behind the abandonment of these precursor settlements may never be fully understood. We know that after their disappearance, Cahokia itself would rise to become one of the most advanced societies in North America. The mound-building culture would continue to thrive, with Monk's Mound eventually becoming a symbol of the civilization's power and sophistication. But even Cahokia's grandeur would not shield it from decline. By around 1350 AD, the city would itself be abandoned, its people scattering to the wind. Why did these people leave? And what was it about the landscape they once inhabited that caused them to disappear so suddenly? Perhaps the answers lie buried beneath the earth, hidden in the unexcavated mounds that dot the landscape. Or perhaps the clues are lost forever in the winds that still blow across the fertile riverbanks. The mystery of the abandoned settlements of Cahokia is not just one of missing people or lost cities. It is a reminder that human history is full of forgotten stories that often slip away before we can fully understand them. What happened here, and what still remains undiscovered? Only time will tell. As we move through time, unraveling some of history's greatest mysteries, we now turn our gaze to the windswept shores of Scandinavia, a land once dominated by fierce warriors, where the sagas and stories of Viking valor still echo in the hearts of many. But amidst these tales of heroism and conquest, there exists a darker, more unsettling mystery, one that involves the Viking Berserkers, legendary warriors whose unnatural rage seemed to transcend mere mortal strength and fury. Imagine, if you will, a cold winter's day in the Viking Age, around the 9th to 11th centuries. The northern seas churn violently beneath the shadows of longships as they approach the shores of an enemy settlement. On board these vessels, there were men, elite fighters, known not only for their skill in combat, but for a terrifying berserker rage that seemed to overtake them in battle. Accounts from various sagas and historical texts describe these warriors as fighting with an almost superhuman fury, impervious to pain and unstoppable in battle. They were often said to howl like wild animals, their eyes glazed with a primal madness, and their strength exponentially increased by this frenzy. The name Berserker itself is derived from the Old Norse words bear, and serker, shirt, which could refer to the bear shirts or animal pelts that these warriors wore, or perhaps to the wild, untamed nature of their battle frenzy, resembling the strength and aggression of a bear in the wild. Berserkers were more than just warriors. They were symbols of primal rage, invoked by their comrades and feared by their enemies. But the question remains, what was the true source of this unnatural rage? For centuries, historians and archaeologists have attempted to decipher what made these warriors so extraordinarily violent and insensitive to pain. Was it simply the product of an intense battle mindset, a psychological state brought on by extreme conditions? Or could there have been something more biological or even supernatural involved? The mystery of the Berserkers remains as murky and enigmatic as the seas they once sailed. Many early sources, such as the Viking sagas and the writings of chroniclers like Saxo Grammaticus, describe berserkers as men who would fall into a trance-like rage, completely out of control during combat. Some sources suggest they were even immune to fire or to the wounds of blades and arrows, their bodies seemingly impervious to the dangers that would kill ordinary men. The berserkers' fury was said to be so all-consuming that it was believed they might be under the influence of the gods, perhaps the god Odin himself, who was associated with battle frenzy, death, and warfare. Yet, despite these legendary accounts, the true nature of the berserkers remains clouded in uncertainty. Some of the more plausible explanations lie within the realms of psychology and neurology. Could it have been a psychological condition triggered by the intense, life-or-death experiences of battle? The concept of battle rage or berserk rage is not unique to the Vikings. In fact, it has been recorded in various warrior cultures throughout history. The psychological phenomenon could have been a reaction to combat stress, a way for the warriors to overcome their fear and channel an almost superhuman strength in the heat of battle. However, modern science has offered another theory that could explain the berserkers' violent behavior, a physical condition known as excited delirium. This is a psychological and physiological state often brought on by extreme stress, aggression, or drug use, in which the individual may experience hallucinations, sensory distortion, and an almost superhuman endurance. While this condition is typically associated with more modern cases, some have speculated that certain Vikings may have induced such frenzies in themselves using psychoactive substances, specifically mushrooms or plant-based drugs. Indeed, there are accounts of berserkers consuming what might have been psychoactive mushrooms, such as Amanita muscaria, the iconic red and white mushroom, which contains a potent hallucinogen called muscimol. When consumed in large doses, this mushroom has been known to induce a state of delirium, often accompanied by feelings of invincibility and a sense of unnatural strength. The Berserkers may have used such substances to induce their violent rages, enabling them to fight through pain and fear with an almost otherworldly resilience. But the idea of psychoactive substances as the sole cause of their madness has its critics. Many question whether the Vikings had such knowledge of hallucinogenic plants, or if the berserker condition could have been linked to something far deeper and more complex than drug use. Could there have been a cultural or religious element at play? The berserkers were often depicted as warriors chosen by the gods, imbued with a divine rage that could not be explained by mere earthly means. Were these men, in fact, shamans, priests, or warriors chosen to channel the fury of the gods? There is also the possibility that the berserkers were part of a larger religious practice, in which they embodied the role of sacred warriors, acting as conduits for divine anger and violence. Their battle frenzy could have been seen as a form of spiritual possession, where they were believed to be inhabited by a god or spirit, with their rage representing the vengeance of the gods. If this was the case, the berserkers' frenzied state might not have been something to be feared by the Vikings, but rather something to be celebrated, a ritualistic transformation that connected the warriors with their ancestral gods. Some even suggest that the berserker rage could have been a form of group psychology, where the berserkers fed off the collective energy of the warriors around them. The camaraderie and collective tension of the Viking war bands may have triggered a circular feedback loop in which the berserkers' madness amplified and spread to others. In this way, the berserker condition might not have been purely individual, but a communal experience, tied to the shared understanding of honor, glory, and sacrifice. Yet, while there are many theories, none offer definitive proof as to what truly made the berserkers so frenzied. Was it psychological? Was it a chemical reaction triggered by substance use? Or was it something more cultural, a manifestation of the Viking belief system, where rage was a form of divine communion? What is certain is that the berserkers left an indelible mark on Viking culture and history. They were feared by their enemies and revered by their comrades. To this day, their sagas echo through the ages, painting a picture of men who could channel the very essence of fury. Warriors not of this world, whose rage transformed them into something more than human. Yet, despite the passing of centuries, we are still left to wonder, was the berserker rage a gift, a curse, or perhaps a carefully cultivated state of mind? And, perhaps most intriguingly, what secrets lie hidden in the accounts of their battles, their sacrifices, and their crazed fury? Secrets that may yet offer us a deeper understanding of what drove these legendary warriors to fight with such unparalleled rage. As we journey deeper into the intricate web of history, there are few events more devastating and far-reaching than the Black Death, a plague that decimated populations across Europe, Asia, and Africa in the 14th century. But what if the Black Death didn't just appear out of nowhere? What if its deadly pathogen had been circulating for centuries, spreading in hidden outbreaks long before the devastating wave of the 1340s? To understand the true origins of the Black Death, we must trace its footsteps back to the heart of Central Asia, a vast and largely unexplored region, rich with history and mystery. Here, in the deserted steppes and mountainous terrains of places like Mongolia, Kazakhstan, and the Tarim Basin, the first signs of the plague's precursor outbreaks may have been quietly unfolding. Imagine the vast, sweeping landscapes of Central Asia, an ancient crossroads of civilizations where nomadic tribes roamed freely and trade caravans would trek along the famous Silk Road. This remote region, bordered by the Gobi Desert to the north and the Himalayas to the south, was a hub for both cultural exchange and the spread of diseases. Pestilence had long been a silent companion to trade routes, though it's likely that the scale of destruction we associate with the Black Death would not have been fully understood until much later. Long before the Black Death reached Europe, there were outbreaks in the Asian heartlands, the first rumblings of what would later become an epidemic of global proportions. Written accounts from the Mongol Empire and other medieval chronicles hint at earlier outbreaks that could have been the precursors to the plague's massive spread in the 14th century. One of the most significant of these early outbreaks occurred in the early 1300s in the region of Mongolia. But even earlier than that, the plague was likely circulating in the deep heart of Central Asia. The Yersinia pestis bacterium, which causes bubonic plague, was likely present in the wildlife of Central Asia for centuries before humans became its primary victims. Rats, the usual carriers of the disease, would have encountered fleas that transmitted the bacteria, and the disease could have spread between animal populations, creating a reservoir for human transmission. But was it only through rats that the plague spread, or could the mysterious outbreaks have been more complex? The earliest written records of these early plague outbreaks come from the historical writings of the time, including Chinese and Persian texts. Chinese sources report a major plague outbreak in 1331 AD in the region of Mongolia. This could have been the earliest recorded outbreak of the plague that would later spread along trade routes, killing millions. However, other sources suggest that the plague had been circulating in Central Asia much earlier than this, with smaller, localized outbreaks occurring as early as the 8th century AD. But what makes these early outbreaks particularly intriguing is the lack of documentation and the elusiveness of the evidence. Did the plague spread as a slow, insidious force, or did it arrive in sporadic, localized eruptions? Some historians believe that climatic factors, like a mini ice age in the 13th century, may have played a role in amplifying these early outbreaks. Could a colder, harsher climate have led to a greater reliance on stored grain, which would have been more likely to attract rats and fleas? The idea that ecological factors helped shape the trajectory of these outbreaks invites us to rethink the causes of such widespread devastation. In addition to climate, the warlike empires of the region, particularly the Mongols, might have unknowingly played a role in the spread of the disease. Genghis Khan and his successors built a vast empire, expanding across Central Asia, and they regularly engaged in military campaigns that involved the movement of large groups of people, soldiers, and animals. The Mongol conquests brought with them the unintended consequence of disease, as armies often carried the very fleas and rodents that harbored the plague. The Mongol siege of Kaffa in 1346, for example, is often cited as a major event that accelerated the spread of the disease to Europe. During the siege, it is believed that the Mongols may have launched plague-infected corpses over the city walls, spreading the bacteria to the inhabitants and beyond. But if the plague was already circulating in the heart of Asia centuries before, why did it take so long for it to fully erupt into the Black Death that devastated Europe in the mid-14th century? One possibility lies in the interaction between humans and rodent populations. As the Silk Road began to increase trade across the continent, humans and rats began to interact on a scale never seen before. It's possible that bubonic plague had been quietly moving across the region for centuries, waiting for the right conditions, a vulnerable population, a network of trade routes, and the right ecological conditions to cause a massive outbreak. Another element that complicates our understanding of the plague's early origins is the question of the disease's true nature. Was it only the bubonic plague that caused such devastation, or did other related diseases like septicemic or pneumonic plague play a role as well? The ability of the plague to spread through both fleas and airborne droplets would have made it particularly difficult to contain once it had gained a foothold in a densely populated area. Moreover, the concept of quarantines was still in its infancy during these early outbreaks. The lack of medical understanding and the primitive state of public health systems likely contributed to the disease's rapid spread. But there's another, more speculative theory that suggests the disease's spread was not entirely natural. Could there have been an element of biological warfare at play? Some scholars have suggested that the Mongols, in their constant military campaigns, may have intentionally weaponized the disease to strike at their enemies. Could the bubonic plague have been used as an early form of biological weaponry? While there is no direct evidence to support such a claim, the idea remains a subject of ongoing debate. What we do know, however, is that the early outbreaks in Central Asia were a harbinger of the devastation that would unfold in the coming centuries. Today, as we reflect on the Black Death's precursor outbreaks, the mystery of its true origins remains largely unsolved. Was it a slow burn of localized outbreaks across Central Asia, or did something more cataclysmic trigger the outbreak that would sweep across the world? The complexities of human history, climate, trade, and war, all intertwined to create a perfect storm for one of the deadliest pandemics in recorded history. And yet, as we continue to piece together the puzzle of the Black Death, one question lingers. Could there still be pieces of the plague's early history hidden deep within the archaeological sites and forgotten texts of Central Asia, waiting to reveal the full extent of its origins? What might still be uncovered about the silent journeys of this ancient disease? Perhaps the answers lie in places where few have dared to look, lost to time, or simply too elusive to grasp. As we continue our exploration of history's most profound mysteries, we arrive at the enigmatic fall of the Gupta Empire, a civilization that once flourished in the heart of ancient India. Often referred to as the Golden Age of India, the Gupta period is marked by unparalleled achievements in art, science, philosophy, and literature. Yet, like so many great empires throughout history, it fell into a slow, inexplicable decline. Unlike the dramatic falls of other civilizations, often marked by conquest, invasion, or catastrophic events, the Gupta Empire's fall remains shrouded in mystery. At its zenith, the Gupta Empire spanned much of the Indian subcontinent, with Pataliputra, modern-day Patna, as its capital. The empire was a hub of intellectual and cultural activity, where scholars like Aryabhata, Kalidasa, and Varahamihira contributed to mathematics, astronomy, literature, and medicine. The art and architecture of the time were groundbreaking, and the Gupta rulers were seen as benevolent and enlightened. Yet, by the end of the 6th century, the once mighty empire began to crumble, leaving behind a series of cities that would eventually become abandoned, forgotten, or in some cases, all but erased from history. To understand the silent fall of the Gupta Empire, we must first examine its cities, the heart of its political, economic, and cultural life. Pataliputra, the most prominent of these cities, was an urban marvel, bustling with trade, commerce, and knowledge. It was a cosmopolitan city, home to scholars, artisans, and traders from across the subcontinent and beyond. And yet, after the Gupta dynasty's decline, Pataliputra, along with many other cities, fell into a quiet decay. Why did this vibrant metropolis, once a center of learning and power, fade into obscurity? Was it merely the inevitable result of shifting political dynamics, or was there something more behind the empire's decline? To answer these questions, we must look at the factors that contributed to the Gupta Empire's downfall. Historians have long debated the reasons behind the Gupta Empire's decline. Unlike the Roman Empire or the Mayan civilization, the Guptas were not defeated by foreign invaders. Instead, their downfall seems to have been caused by a combination of internal strife, economic instability, and external pressures. The most significant blow came from the Hunna invasions in the mid-5th century. The Huns, a nomadic group from the northern steppes, launched several invasions into the Gupta Empire, destabilizing its borders. The Hunna raids weakened the Gupta's military might, leading to the loss of crucial territories. However, while these invasions were a serious blow, they do not fully explain the sudden abandonment of the cities. The Huns were eventually repelled, yet the collapse continued. Another contributing factor was the economic burden placed on the Gupta Empire. At its peak, the Gupta Empire was heavily involved in trade, with routes stretching as far as the Mediterranean, Central Asia, and Southeast Asia. However, internal economic strain and declining agricultural productivity weakened the empire's foundation. The decline in trade and the increasing tax burdens placed on the population likely led to growing unrest. Simultaneously, the empire began to fragment as regional powers asserted their autonomy, leading to a decentralization of power. As the Gupta rulers struggled to maintain control over their vast territories, the once unified empire began to splinter, with local leaders gaining more control and effectively weakening the imperial authority. In contrast to the chaotic and violent falls of other great empires, the Gupta cities seem to have quietly withered away. Historians and archaeologists have struggled to pinpoint exactly when or why these cities were abandoned, but there are clues hidden in the remnants of their once grand structures. Take, for instance, Pataliputra. The city, once a shining example of Gupta civilization, gradually faded from the historical record. The collapse of the Gupta Empire led to the rise of local rulers who, over time, shifted their focus away from the old cities and into newly established ones. Pataliputra, once the political heart of the empire, eventually lost its significance. While no single event can be pinpointed as the cause of its abandonment, there are several possible explanations. Climate change may have played a role. Evidence suggests that the climate in parts of North India began to change around the time of the Gupta collapse, with shifting monsoon patterns and extended droughts affecting agricultural output. This could have further exacerbated the economic instability of the Gupta Empire, leading to the abandonment of cities that were once reliant on agriculture and trade. Archaeological findings in Pataliputra suggest that the city's infrastructure deteriorated over time, with signs of neglect and a decline in urban planning. But what of the other Gupta cities that vanished into history? In regions like Ujjain and Ayodhya, once thriving urban centers, evidence of their once grand stature can still be found in the form of ruins, temples, and inscriptions, but these cities too slowly decayed over time. Much like Pataliputra, regional leaders gradually shifted their focus to new capitals, leaving behind abandoned cities. Why, though, did the cities seem to fall silent rather than suffer the fate of violent conquest? Was the abandonment gradual, or did something more sudden trigger their decline? While there is no concrete explanation for the fall of these cities, there are several theories that attempt to shed light on the mystery. Some historians suggest that the Gupta rulers' focus on urbanization and luxury may have inadvertently drained the empire's resources. The creation of grand cities with intricate infrastructure and elaborate palaces may have placed a significant strain on the empire's economy. As the empire faced increasing internal strife and external threats, the resources that once fueled these cities began to dwindle. This slow process of depletion could explain why the cities did not fall suddenly, but instead withered away over time. Others have suggested that the Gupta Empire's religious shift played a role in the empire's decline. While Hinduism was dominant, the Gupta period also saw the rise of Buddhism and the expansion of Jainism. The religious transitions of the time may have contributed to social upheaval. As different factions vied for influence, the once unified political and cultural landscape of the empire began to fracture, leading to the slow decline of the cities that once symbolized Gupta power. One more speculative theory suggests that the cities may have been abandoned due to an unknown epidemic. While there is no direct evidence to support this, it's possible that a disease, perhaps something like the bubonic plague or another infectious illness, swept through the region. In ancient times, entire cities could fall silent in the wake of disease, leaving behind only their decaying structures. The slow, silent fall of the Gupta Empire's cities remains one of history's unsolved mysteries. The empire's collapse, in the face of internal instability and external pressures, is well documented. But the cities, once vibrant and teeming with life, simply vanished, leaving behind ruins and puzzles for future generations to piece together. Was it a gradual decay of resources, a shift in political focus, or perhaps an entirely unforeseen event that caused the once great cities to fall silent? Perhaps the answers lie hidden in the soil of long-forgotten ruins, or buried within the dusty scrolls of ancient texts, waiting for the right minds to decipher them. As we continue to peel back the layers of history, we are reminded that not all mysteries of the past are destined to be solved. Some, like the fall of the Gupta cities, may remain just out of reach, their secrets locked away in time, lost to the ages. As we continue to trace the thread of history's most confounding mysteries, we now find ourselves in the shadowed, windswept burial sites of early Anglo-Saxon England. Here, among the graves of long-forgotten warriors, traders, and settlers, there lies a chilling enigma, an eerie pattern of headless skeletons. These bones, carefully arranged yet decapitated, hint at practices, beliefs, or events that we cannot fully understand, leaving us with a profound and unsettling question. Why were these people buried without their heads? The first discoveries of these headless Anglo-Saxon burials were made during archaeological excavations of early medieval cemeteries in England, dating back to around the 6th and 7th centuries A.D. The burial sites, often located in rural areas, near settlement boundaries, or alongside ancient roads, revealed not only the skeletal remains of those who lived in this turbulent era, but also something distinctly unusual. In many cases, the bodies were carefully placed in graves, but the skulls were absent. Instead, the bones of the legs, arms, and torsos lay undisturbed, as though the body had been intentionally severed at the neck. Some graves contained a single body, while others had multiple decapitated remains, all positioned as though they were meant to be part of something larger, perhaps a ritual, a punishment, or even a war-related tradition. With each new excavation, the number of these peculiar graves grew, and so too did the questions. Why, in a time when the Anglo-Saxon people were deeply tied to their faith, their families, and their warrior cultures, would such a bizarre burial practice exist? Were these people being punished for some transgression, or was there a far more mysterious reason behind the severing of their heads? As archaeologists sift through the remains, several plausible, yet still speculative theories have been proposed to explain the headless burials. Each offers a potential insight into this strange chapter of history, though none seem to provide a complete answer. One of the most widely discussed explanations centers on the idea of ritual sacrifice or execution. In many ancient cultures, decapitation was a symbol of punishment or retribution, often reserved for criminals or enemies of the state. In Anglo-Saxon England, where tribal warfare was common and the role of warriors was elevated, it's possible that these headless skeletons were those of individuals who had been executed for violating social codes, committing crimes, or perhaps even as sacrificial offerings to gods or spirits. Archaeological evidence suggests that decapitation was sometimes a practice performed on enemies slain in battle, a symbolic act of conquest and domination. The headless bodies could represent those who were killed during raids, with their heads taken as trophies or as part of ritualistic warfare customs. If this is the case, the headless burial might have been a form of posthumous punishment for those whose lives were lost in conflict. Moreover, many cultures believed that the head was the seat of the soul or of spiritual power, and its severing might have been seen as a means of ensuring that the individual could not rise again. Could it be that these individuals were considered to have dishonored the gods, or were they buried in such a way to prevent their spirits from haunting the living? Another theory posits that the headless burials were related to the individual's social or religious status. During the early Anglo-Saxon period, society was organized around complex systems of kinship, loyalties, and tribal allegiances. Some believe that the headless skeletons might belong to individuals who were social outcasts, perhaps people who had been rejected by their tribes or communities for reasons we can only guess at. Criminals, traitors, or those who had committed heinous acts might have been denied the dignity of a full burial, with their heads removed as a form of humiliation. Another possibility lies in the religious sphere. The early Anglo-Saxons practiced paganism, and their beliefs were rich with ceremonial rituals meant to placate the gods and secure prosperity. It is possible that the decapitation was a ritual act meant to appease a deity or as a sacrifice to ensure fertility or victory in battle. In some cases, these severed heads may have been placed in ritual contexts, whether on stakes or in sacrificial altars, to represent the defeat of evil or enemies. The Viking Age, which began in the late 8th century, may also shed some light on the mystery of these headless burials. While the Vikings are most often associated with raids and plundering, their influence on the Anglo-Saxons may have extended beyond violence and warfare. Vikings were known to conduct complex rituals, some of which involved the decapitation of enemies or the displaying of heads to demonstrate power and dominance. It is conceivable that these headless burials represent victims of Viking raids, their bodies left behind as a statement of conquest. If these headless burials date from the early Anglo-Saxon period, there may have been an evolving cultural exchange between the Anglo-Saxons and their northern neighbors, the Vikings. The shared customs of ritualized violence and warfare might have led to the adoption of decapitation as a common practice. Could these grave sites indicate a period when Anglo-Saxon society was being influenced by Viking beliefs or even infiltrated by Viking warriors themselves? Perhaps the headless burials mark the violent merging of two cultures, each with their own traditions of honoring the dead. Beyond social and religious explanations, some have considered more scientific or medical reasons for the headless skeletons. One intriguing possibility involves the psychological or physiological condition known as Berserkergang. The Berserkers were warrior elites, often associated with the Vikings, who were believed to fight in a state of wild, animal-like frenzy. Some historical accounts suggest that these warriors might have been afflicted with a psychological condition that triggered episodes of uncontrollable rage, a fury so intense that they would lose control over their actions and commit acts of extreme violence. Could the headless burials be linked to a similar condition among early Anglo-Saxon warriors? If so, the decapitation might have been a result of battle wounds sustained during such frenzied states, or perhaps a symbolic gesture to honor these warriors' courage and brutality. Despite decades of archaeological inquiry, the true nature of the headless Anglo-Saxon burials remains elusive. Were these decapitated remains the result of ritualistic practices, punishments, or the brutality of early medieval warfare? Was decapitation a form of ritual sacrifice, or was it a way to assert dominance over a defeated foe? And what can these strange burials tell us about the beliefs, customs, and societal structures of early Anglo-Saxon England? We may never know the full truth behind these eerie grave sites. The bones, carefully arranged but separated from their heads, speak of a society whose customs were as mysterious as they were complex. Were these actions a symbolic statement, or were they born out of a deeply ingrained belief system that we no longer understand? Like many ancient practices, these headless skeletons remind us of how much of history remains just beyond our reach, its answers hidden in the soil, waiting to be uncovered by those brave enough to question what lies beneath. The headless burials stand as a testament to a past that refuses to reveal all its secrets, challenging us to think more deeply about the people who lived in those dark ages, and about the rituals, beliefs, and customs that may have shaped their lives and deaths. Could we one day unravel the final truth of these mysterious graves, or will the silent remains forever guard their secrets? As we continue our journey through the enigmatic chapters of history, we now venture into the heart of Southeast Asia, where an empire once dominated vast stretches of land, a powerful maritime kingdom known as the Srivijaya. This kingdom flourished for centuries, controlling vital trade routes across the Southeast Asian archipelago, from the Malay Peninsula to Sumatra and beyond. It was an empire of great wealth, knowledge, and influence, but the story of its disappearance is shrouded in mystery. More perplexing still is the vanishing of the Srivijaya royal records, a loss that continues to baffle historians and archaeologists alike. At its zenith, the Srivijaya Empire was a powerful naval force, its fleet commanding the waters between India and China, ensuring the smooth flow of spices, gold, and silk along the ancient trade routes. Founded around 600 AD, Srivijaya quickly grew into a cultural and religious center, blending elements of Hinduism, Buddhism, and indigenous beliefs. Its capital, located on the island of Palembang in Sumatra, became a bustling metropolis, a beacon of influence and prosperity. Srivijaya's significance was not merely due to its control over trade, but also its intellectual and spiritual contributions. The kingdom became a hub for the spread of Buddhism, especially the Mahayana tradition, and its scholars were renowned throughout Southeast Asia and beyond. The monastic universities that flourished under Srivijaya's patronage became some of the most influential in the world, attracting students and monks from across the region. The Buddhist texts produced in these institutions, many of which were written in Sanskrit, were central to the development of Southeast Asian Buddhist thought. Yet, for all its power and wealth, the Srivijaya Empire eventually fell into decline, and by the 13th century, it had largely disappeared from the historical record, its capital abandoned, its influence waning. But the story of Srivijaya's disappearance is not just one of military defeats or economic decline. It is marked by an even more mysterious event: the sudden loss of the royal records. Imagine, if you will, the library of an ancient royal palace. This library would have housed volumes of historical accounts, royal edicts, religious scriptures, and trade documents. These records would have told the story of Srivijaya's rise to power, its internal workings, and its relationship with neighboring kingdoms. Yet, despite the empire's evident cultural and intellectual richness, very few written records from the Srivijaya period have survived to the present day. The royal records of Srivijaya, if they ever existed in the form we imagine, seem to have vanished without a trace. Some historians speculate that much of the written knowledge was housed in wooden tablets, palm leaf manuscripts, or stone inscriptions, but as of now, none of these materials have survived. What could have caused such a comprehensive loss of historical documentation? Why is it that while the physical remnants of Srivijaya, its temples, statues, and artifacts, continue to surface through archaeological efforts, the written records have been almost completely obliterated? A range of theories have emerged to explain the disappearance of these crucial royal records. Each offers a potential narrative, but none can fully account for the complete absence of written evidence. Let's explore some of the most compelling ideas. One of the most straightforward theories involves the ravages of nature. Srivijaya's capital, Palembang, was located near the Musi River, a region prone to flooding and other natural disasters. Over the centuries, the region could have experienced a catastrophic event, such as a massive flood, that led to the destruction of both buildings and the written records housed within them. Flooding could have easily damaged wooden manuscripts, papyrus, and other organic materials that were used in record-keeping. Additionally, the region's tropical climate, with its high humidity and seasonal rains, could have accelerated the deterioration of delicate scrolls or palm leaf manuscripts, leaving them vulnerable to complete decay over time. However, while the environment may have claimed many records, it seems improbable that it would have caused the total destruction of such an extensive collection. Surely some documents, if not most, would have survived, unless there were other forces at play. Another possibility is that the loss of Srivijaya's royal records was tied to military conflict. In the 11th century, Srivijaya faced increasing pressure from the rising power of the Chola Empire in India. The Cholas launched several naval expeditions against Srivijaya, with the most notable being the 1025 AD invasion led by Rajaraja Chola I. These invasions resulted in devastating losses for Srivijaya, and it's possible that during the course of these battles, the royal records were ransacked, destroyed, or lost in the chaos of war. Could the loss of Srivijaya's written history be the result of the destruction brought on by foreign invaders? It is plausible that in the aftermath of the invasion, the Chola Empire or other enemies of Srivijaya might have deliberately sought to erase the kingdom's cultural identity by destroying its most significant historical documents. This would have been a strategy to not only conquer the region, but also to obliterate the memory of Srivijaya's greatness. Beyond external threats, some scholars believe that Srivijaya's internal collapse could have been a contributing factor to the loss of royal records. As the empire weakened, it's possible that there was a deliberate effort to destroy historical records in an attempt to sever the kingdom's ties to its past. In moments of political unrest or dynastic change, rulers may have sought to erase the legacy of previous administrations in order to redefine their own authority. The burning of records, or their deliberate burial, could have been a way of symbolically severing ties with a less prosperous or less powerful era. Alternatively, it is possible that religious upheaval played a role in the destruction of Srivijaya's royal records. As Buddhism continued to spread throughout Southeast Asia, certain rulers might have sought to destroy records associated with older pagan traditions. This would have been an effort to reinforce the power of the new religious order and erase any trace of the old ways. Finally, there is the possibility that the disappearance of the Srivijaya royal records was intentional, a deliberate act of erasure carried out by those who wished to bury Srivijaya's history. Some have speculated that the records may have been hidden or concealed, perhaps by those seeking to safeguard knowledge from enemies, or perhaps by religious or political leaders who wished to keep certain information hidden. Could these records contain secrets too dangerous to be allowed to survive? Could it be that Srivijaya's greatest treasures were locked away, only to be lost forever as the world moved on, its knowledge fading into oblivion? Despite the intriguing theories and ongoing excavations, the fate of the Srivijaya royal records remains unsolved. Whether lost to natural disaster, military conflict, internal collapse, or a conspiracy of silence, the absence of these records leaves a profound gap in our understanding of the Srivijaya Empire. This mystery, like so many others, reminds us of the fragile nature of history and the impermanence of written memory. The Srivijaya Empire, once a beacon of wealth and culture, has left behind tangible remnants, its temples, statues, and artifacts, but its written history has largely vanished. What secrets, what knowledge, what stories might have been lost to time? As we look back upon the legacy of Srivijaya, we are left with more questions than answers. Could there still be undiscovered records hidden in the depths of the Indonesian islands, waiting to be found? Or have we already lost the final traces of Srivijaya's past, forever out of reach? The mystery of the Srivijaya royal records persists, standing as a silent reminder that even the greatest of empires can fade into obscurity, their stories lost to the winds of time.